Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to day 151 of the news and another great Sunday of fundraising for Doctors Without Borders.
And of course, we have a lot of massive things to cover tonight. First off, the muscle in my neck is a-okay, and so we're all running back to normal in every regard. Second, we have just entered the very first day of the 6th month of war. With the passing of the last night's stream, we had entered the first hours of the 6th month of the war, and Ukraine still stands to this very day as a testament and a sign that the Russians are not winning, and that the Ukrainians and the world still has hope that democracy and freedom can be protected within Ukraine. And wonderful message to start off today with, and of course to start off our fundraiser. And so without further ado, let's speak about that fundraiser. Of course, as y'all can see right here, it is another fundraiser for Doctors Without Borders, which is honestly my favorite nonprofit out there. I believe that they do incredible work. If we would like to take a quick little second, we can pull up their website, Doctors Without Borders, and pull it up right here. And as we go here, I can't click on ads, but as we go here, you can see that Doctors Without Borders travels around the entire world and operates on patients, makes sure it gives medical checkup and medical supplies wherever needed, and they do an incredible job. They are a wonderful organization, one of the largest out there on top of that, and they make sure that almost all of their funds that they get through donations go into actually helping out people on the ground. Something like 80% of the donations that they get go towards actually helping people out. The remaining 20% is for the payroll for the doctors, surgeons, and all of the people who actually work behind the scenes to keep Doctors Without Borders rolling. And so it's an incredible nonprofit organization. I believe that they're one of the best and have been doing the most to help out Ukraine ever since the start. And I highly suggest that y'all help me and help Ukraine tonight in supporting Doctors Without Borders and helping them to continue on their extraordinary work. I, of course, threw in my $100 at the very beginning of the stream. If you were here within the first 3 minutes, I believe, you would have seen it. So if you have any questions about how much do I support them, every single time we run a fundraiser, I put in $100. And so if you would like to match me, $100 is the figure. And if you would like to just support, any amount helps. If we just got $2 from everyone watching right now, we would be well beyond the goal. And so without further ado, with that in mind, it's time to start off this incredible day of news. And so let's go over the schedule and see what we're going to be talking about first. We're actually going to be doing a little bit of a change tonight. We're actually going to be covering the international news first. I believe that this is also important because while we're, of course, raising funds for Doctors Without Borders to keep their medical supplies rolling, the United States has also been ensuring that their military supplies will keep rolling. And we've also seen that medical aid here in the United States is rolling as well. After we cover the U.S. news, we're then going to be going over into Russia to see the news from Russia, and also the kind of medical support a Russian soldier gets once they've been wounded. And I have to tell you, it's actually pretty sad. After we cover that news, we'll then be moving down into Ukraine, and we'll be covering tonight. We're actually not going to be covering the location unknowns in a full section. We're only going to be covering the first 4 location unknowns of this section, and then we'll be taking a break before moving on to the next line in this location unknown section and looking at our largest super chat donor, well, not super chat, fundraiser donors for the night, recognizing them for helping out Doctors Without Borders and in turn helping out Ukraine, and then answering 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the last column of the location unknown news, and finally moving into the Kharkiv area, the Izium and Balaklia area, and also Kramatorsk. After we cover all of that news, we're then going to move on into the Lysychansk area. But before we get there, we're going to take another pause to answer another 3 questions from the chat and also recognize some of the highest fundraiser donors who have helped this fundraiser get to where it's been. After we do that, we'll then move into the Lysychansk area. We'll also be covering a very old clip, but brand new for us, that we just saw in Mariupol, and we'll also be moving over and covering the news in Polohi, Kherson, and the rest of the news within the inside of Ukraine. And finally, rounding out tonight's news with a speech from President Zelensky. After we do this, we'll then, of course, be circling back to the fundraiser and answering as many questions as we can. I highly suggest that y'all help out and support this fundraiser, and if you would like to help this stream to get to more people, to try and get this as big a fundraiser as possible, make sure to hit the like button and also share this on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, wherever you go, wherever you are on social media, make sure to go and share this with everyone and tell them that we're running a fundraiser right now and any support would help. Even if your friends could just chip in $1 a piece, that goes a long way to helping out Ukrainian lives if hundreds of people do that. And so without further ado, I also have one last thing to say. I know that we built up this stream to be an incredibly large one, and we were saying that we were going to have a lot of guest stars on. Unfortunately, we did not get a response from most of our hoped to be guest stars. We, of course, sadly have not heard from Denis Davidov or Speak the Truth. We did send an email out to them, but we've never gotten a response, and they've also not reached out to us as of the stream starting. And so, unfortunately, none of those guest stars are on, and also it appears that Operator Starsky may have been called away on urgent business, as he was not able to show up tonight as well. So it's just Matthew and me, just the two of us as the Billy Withers song goes. And so, without further ado, let's travel across the seas to the United States first and cover the news that we've seen within the country. And we're going to start off with a very heartwarming scene in the city of Minneapolis in Minnesota, as 2 Ukrainian soldiers who have been wounded, amputees, have arrived in the United States to receive prosthetics. And so, without further ado, here's the video. Let me get this off the screen. Oh, wait a minute. Looks like we may have had a freeze there. Hang on. For some reason, it froze. So, hopefully it runs now. Here we go. Now we can see them receiving flowers after a singing of the national anthem by everyone at the airport. And it's wonderful to know that they will be receiving medical support, and not just any medical support, but right here in our very own country. And I'm proud to see that the United States has continued to be a great friend and ally to the Ukrainians throughout the entirety of this war, and we're even more than happy to bring in refugees to, of course, help out the Ukrainians and the citizens who have been displaced as much as possible, and also provide medical assistance, including prosthetics, to these Ukrainian soldiers. We don't know exactly what kind of prosthetics they are going to get. I do know that the United States is one of the leading nations right now in the world in terms of prosthetic technology, even getting so far as to where we actually have mechanical arms now with retracting fingers, which can be individually retracted, moved, and also placed. And we're even working on technology right now where the operator of the arm can actually feel what the arm and the hand is touching. So an incredibly interesting bit. I don't know if they're going to be getting that kind of technology, but still any support helps, and I'm glad to see that they will be getting that kind of support here in the United States. And while Doctors Without Borders does not provide that kind of assistance, at least here in the United States, I believe, they do provide surgeries to save these people's lives and stabilize them, so that way they can eventually reach maybe the United States and get this kind of medical support. And so once again, to plug this stream, because while we don't plug a lot of stuff about our channel, I will make sure to plug the living daylights out of a fundraiser. These fundraisers go a long way to help out Ukrainian soldiers like these and civilians who have been wounded in these ways to even survive to be able to get to this point. And so if you would like to see more videos and instances like that where soldiers are able to receive prosthetics, make sure to support Doctors Without Borders, because they are the leading organization that has been getting soldiers and citizens to this point to be able to receive prosthetics. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that nice, heartwarming bit of news, and we're now going to be moving on into Washington, D.C., well, really Arlington, Virginia, to the important topic of support militarily. And we can see today that more weapons are heading to Ukraine. A brand new $270 million package has been provided to the Ukrainians, and we can see here, according to the roster, and I'll read this all for y'all. Immediate release, fact sheet on U.S. security assistance to Ukraine. This was dated July 22nd, 2022, but we just got this information today on the 24th of July. In total, the United States has committed approximately $8.2 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the current government, including approximately $7.6 billion since the beginning of Russia's unprovoked and brutal invasion on February 24th. On July 22nd, the Department of Defense announced $270 million in additional security assistance for Ukraine, including our 16th presidential drawdown of security assistance, valued at up to $175 million, as well as $95 million in Ukrainian security assistance initiative funds. The United States security assistance committed to Ukraine includes, and this is the current package, 1,400 Stinger anti-aircraft systems, 6,500 Javelin anti-armor systems, 20,000 other anti-armor systems, 700 Switchblades, 126 155mm howitzers, and 411,000 155mm artillery shells, 72,000 105mm artillery rounds, 126 tactical vehicles to tow the 155mm howitzers, 22 tactical vehicles to recover equipment, 16 high-mobility artillery rocket systems and ammunition. That in short terms means 16 additional HIMARS are on their way in this package, 4 command post vehicles, 2 NASAMS, 20 Mi-17 helicopters, counter battery systems, hundreds of armored high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, 200 M113s, 10,000 grenade launchers and small arms, 59 million rounds of small arms ammunition, 75,000 sets of body armor and helmets, 700 Phoenix Ghost tactical unmanned aerial systems, laser-guided rocket systems, Puma unmanned aerial systems, unmanned coastal defense vessels, 26 counter-artillery radars, 4 counter-mortar radars, 4 aerial surveillance radars, 2 Harpoon coastal defense systems, 18 coastal and riverine patrol boats, M18A1 Claymore anti-personnel munitions, no number was given, C4 explosives, no number was given, demolition munitions and demolition equipment for obstacle clearing, tactical secure communication systems, thousands of night vision devices, thermal image systems, optics, and laser rangefinders, commercial satellite imagery services, which we've been providing since the start of the war, explosive ordnance disposal protective gear, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protective equipment, medical supplies including IFAKs, electronic jamming equipment, field equipment, and spare parts, funding for training, maintenance, and sustainment of Ukrainian forces. The United States also continues to work with its allies and partners to provide Ukraine with additional capabilities to defend itself. And as you can see, based off of that laundry list, which I just read off to all of y'all, this amount of support is rather large. And hopefully, it'll be provided to the Ukrainians and on the ground incredibly soon. Honestly, in terms of the sheer number of equipment that we're seeing sent over, this may be one of the largest packages we've ever seen. They're bolstering almost everything that we have already sent over by 100%. There are currently 2 NASAMS in the country and around 12 to 16 HIMARS there as we speak, and they're already sending over an additional 16 along with 2 more NASAMS. And I've got to say, this is really impressive, and I'm glad to see that the United States is definitely stepping up instead of providing loads of monetary assistance where we don't actually see the breakdown. We actually saw the breakdown on this one, and I have to say that the amount of equipment we're sending over is massive. And so with that, great to see, and I can't wait to see more of American systems in use on the front lines. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Washington, D.C. Very neat place, by the way. Well, I guess you could say the suburbs aren't a neat place, but the actual downtown of Washington, D.C. is pretty neat. And if you're from the United States or anywhere around the world, I highly recommend you come and see what a lot of people, I guess, would call the capital of the free world. We're now going to be moving out of Washington, D.C. and the United States from both of these incredible pieces of news and signs of solidarity with the Ukrainians, and we're now going to be moving across the seas to the polar opposite, into Russia. We've seen that on Russian state TV, the insanity has continued, and they're even saying now to the Russian public that sanctions will never end because they are never going to agree to any of the demands that the Ukrainians or the Western countries have. And so with that, I'm going to show y'all this little clip, and I'm also going to read off the subtitles to y'all since they'll be hidden below y'all's screens, because this is the definition of insanity. I don't know who here is still anticipating that the sanctions will be lifted, and we're planning our future on the basis that there will be no sanctions. If we have people in charge who believe that in any of our decision-making positions, that person should leave willingly before things get worse for him. It's clear to everyone that this will not happen. We're in the midst of a tectonic shift in our configuration of everything here. Our economy, future, technologies, medicine, culture, which I'll discuss later if someone didn't understand that, and is hoping to wait out in their cozy office until things get as they were before. I have bad news. It won't be like it used to be. It's obvious that the sanctions won't be lifted because a peace agreement will never be signed on conditions of some Ukraine. There will be no peace on their conditions, much less on Ukraine's made-up conditions. It won't happen. There will be an unconditional capitulation. Now Putin is using food, heating, lighting, gas as a weapon. We'll probably start using children's toys that way too. And the heck with them, this is what they want. So you can see a little bit more Russian insanity unfolding on state TV, and it just never ends. I have to show you all this stuff because it gives a very good insight into what the Russian public is being fed and what the central government is most likely thinking. As y'all may not know, this television show in Russia, and all television shows like it, have to be approved by the state government, which is the Russian, I guess you could call federal government. And so these talking points that they're speaking about have already been approved by censors, and this is what the Russian government, this is what Putin wants the Russian people to hear, and maybe in collateral us as well. And we're seeing this straight up insanity unfolding, where now the state government is saying, we're never going to have the sanctions lifted. We're never going to end this war. We don't care how many Russians die. We don't care how bad the economy gets. How bad anything gets, for that matter. We're going to keep this thing going because we just want it to keep going. And so y'all are all going to have to live with that and tighten the belt as we start to run out of luxury foods. Well, these are almost basic foods these days, but in Russia, they'll certainly become luxuries. Sugar, grains, that kind of stuff, they're just going to start running out. So tighten up the belt, folks, because we're just going to keep this thing going until the end of time if we have to. And it's just raw insanity. I've never seen a country in the modern world do something like this. There's been very few times. I would say that the closest any country has ever gotten to something like this before would be the British during the Blitz, when the Germans pretty much had a lockdown on naval shipping to Britain, and the British started to have to tighten the belt just because there was no way to get supplies in, and the British were not going to surrender to the Germans. That's one of the few times recently that I can think of anything like this happening, and that wasn't even by choice, where they're like, yeah, we're going to keep this war going stubbornly because there's no end in sight and there's no hope. We're just going to keep it going just because, and you're going to have to live with it. It was under an entirely different principle, and we can see the Russians here exercising the maximum in insanity and stupidity the world over, and especially trying to make it clear to their own people. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this bit of news, and we're going to be seeing what this kind of talk about, we're going to keep this thing going regardless of what it does to people, we're going to see what that actually results in. And I've got to tell you, the results are terrible. We can see here in this video, we're not really sure if it's in St. Petersburg, this could be anywhere in Russia, but we saw an incredibly dark and sad video today. And usually we, of course, cheer on the destruction of Russian forces, but we can see here a Russian soldier, and I'll explain this video before we see it, just in case it comes as a shock. This Russian soldier has lost both of his arms. Both of them were apparently blown off in some kind of explosion, and it also appears that he has bandaging on his head, and so he may have received some kind of brain damage as well. The Russian government decided, in his valor of dying for really no cause in an endless war that they say they will keep going until the end of time, to award him a medal. I'm not really sure what particular medal this is, but the dad, who's the man who's currently holding the medal, is going to pin it on that son's chest. And when you think about this, this is the ultimate slap in the face for what he's gone through. He's probably gotten a penance pension for his wounds, he got a medal, and he can't even tack it onto his own chest or eat the food in front of him without assistance because both of his arms have been completely blown off. And this is what this war means for average Russian people. And I don't know if we have a lot of Russians watching anymore. It's so late into the war. I'm sure most of them have eventually been weeded off of YouTube, and we just have the bots from the Russian government or pro-Russian organizations floating around out here. But This is what the normal war looks like for the Russians. You either get a lot of money, or you end up with a son that's disfigured where he can't even do anything himself. He can't tie his shoes, he can't eat on his own, he can't shower, he can't do anything. And so here's the video, and I'm not gonna interrupt this, I'm just gonna let y'all soak in the silence and the realization of everyone in the room that their son has suffered a fate worse than death.
Запишу.
Оп. Есть. Есть.
Ура! Молодец, да. Красавец, речком, мужик. Давай крабика своего. Все, молодец.
Ладно, есть что сказать. Уважаемые офицеры, сержанты и все остальные, товарищи.
Майор.
Майор?
И дважды майор.
Вот, и дважды майор. Побывали мы все в таких местах, что потом страшно потом вспоминать. Я хочу, вот, ну, несмотря на то, что со мной такая ситуация, что у кого-то еще хуже, еще хуже. Я хочу сказать, что ну нету смысла убивать. Надо идти вперед, и все будет хорошо.
Умница моя, правильно.
Молодец, да.
Ой, красавчик.
Молодец.
Да где Рахман, ёперный театр? Сейчас обидится, что без него.
Тушить фестиваль.
It's a sad video, and we usually don't feel sympathy a lot for Russians, but in my opinion, this is a fate worse than death. He will not ever be able to do anything on his own, ever, again. And he's pretty much, I mean, I don't even know how to explain that. He went into the war with both of his arms, and now he won't be able to do anything. He can't even open a door on his own, or go to bed on his own. He can't even cover himself with a blanket or anything. He doesn't have the ability to. And all of this has happened to him. And his family's trying to act like it's okay and it was a great thing that this has happened to him because of a war that really didn't even have to start. The Russians just started this thing out of the blue for really no reason, trying to take over Ukraine, annex it, and create a puppet government there. And this boy and this family has paid the price. He may have just joined the Russian army because he had to, and then they forced him into a contract, and his family may have not really been into what the Russians were saying, or that guy. And they've now all ended up with a short end of the stick, while the Russian government sits there and allows state-sponsored television to send the message that regardless of what happens to you average peasants, we're going to keep this war going until the end of time, because that's what we want, and y'all just going to have to live with it. So with that, that's the end of the video, and an unfortunate sight right there. And while I don't give a lot of sympathy to the Russians, I do feel very sorry for the average Russian citizen who really has no say in what's going on in this war and has to end up dealing with stuff like this. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news further on down in the location unknowns inside of Ukraine. And so, starting off with our first bit of news, starting off on a high note tonight, we've seen a little bit of Russian wizardry. Now, tell me something. Does this look like a normal barrel to you? Now, Matthew, we are going to play a game. If you can guess what's wrong with this barrel, I will tell you congratulations if you get it correct. And so, what is wrong with this barrel?
It doesn't look symmetrical.
It doesn't, does it? It looks like they drilled the actual barrel, where the round comes out, further offset to the right than the left. I think some people in the chat may be catching on now. Now that we've looked at this a little bit, let me explain what's happened here. So, a Russian was in a factory making this barrel and apparently had a little bit too much to drink. And so this bore in the center, I guess you could say the rifling, or I don't really know what you call the inside of the barrel, but we'll call it the inside of the barrel, just to be extremely technical. The inside of the barrel is actually supposed to be evenly spaced in between both sides. And so, drunken Igor, he decided to take the drill and just push it down onto it, not really care about the measurements. And so it appears that there's only 8 millimeters of space on the right side and 11 millimeters of space on the left side. Now, one thing I do have to give him credit, it does look like he got it evenly centered, at least top to bottom. It doesn't really look like there's a massive disparity there. But in the actual left to right, a huge disparity. This side is going to be a lot weaker than that side, and this side's going to be a whole lot stronger than that one, as far as metallurgy is concerned. And so this guy definitely screwed up, and it's giving you an idea of Russian quality control and what the Russian military is using. Now, here in America, there's an old saying that goes around, and I'm sure it's common amongst many people, that the highest... Let me think of how this actually goes. Let me think. The soldiers use the weapon of the lowest bidder. I think that's about how the saying goes, if I'm correct, Matthew.
I believe so.
And so, usually in America, there's always this joke that the weapons that the U.S. provides to the soldiers is cheap. I would have to say that the Russians went the extra level here because they don't even have quality control. This is unbelievable, actually. And so with that, that's all we have to talk about here. I hope y'all enjoy looking at this for a spare extra second and just marvel at the stupidity of boring a barrel and not even getting the measurements centered. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a mutiny occur in a Russian unit. We apparently saw a colonel, which, just for y'all to know, a colonel in the United States military and most Western militaries is incredibly high up the chain, but in the Russian military, a colonel is about equivalent to... Oh man, let me think. I think they're about equivalent to a first sergeant or probably a lieutenant. I know that gives a decent amount of range in terms of their authority, but it's not that high up compared to the Western chain of command. The Russians are very top-sided with officers, and so lieutenants in the Russian military, the Russian army, kind of fill in the roles of lower-class sergeants, like just an E5 or an E6 here in Western militaries. So I'm going to let y'all see this video, and you're about to clearly hear and see a Russian unit refuse to advance towards the front.
Товарищ полковник, покажите бумагу, которая указывает.
Я не хочу с вами общаться, вы сильно
Ну вот
умные.
и все, почему мы должны подписаться вашу
общение? Вы не говорите, куда
Вперед,
мы
я
сказали,
говорю,
никуда не поедет никто.
машину вперед.
Никто не поедет.
Не поедете.
We can see the colonel trying to push the men forward and tell them to get in the trucks and get moving, and we can hear the soldiers here on the road saying, we're not going anywhere, we're staying right here.
И вас без наручников.
На основании чего? На основании чего?
Давай, хорошо, основание действует. Уже
Какое
основание
основание? Мы не знали, куда мы летим. Мы не знали.
есть. Все, хорошо.
Вы сами же наши законы.
Девятого числа он сказал: мам, сейчас нас на самолет и увозят в Ростов. Сказали, с Ростова нас направят в нашу воинскую часть, в Абхазию. Потом звонит и говорит, что их с Ростова-на-Дону вертолетами переправили в Луганскую область, город Брянка.
15 числа он нам сообщил о том, что их отправили, что они находятся в подвале, что их 20 человек закрыли в подвале. Находятся без еды, без света. Сказал, что...
And so the soldiers, just to explain to some of y'all who aren't really watching, but more so listening, the soldiers that had refused to move forward had been arrested later on after that video was taken, and the Russians, much like they do to Ukrainian citizens, threw the soldiers into the basement of a building, and we can actually see that apparently they still had their phones and were taking pictures of the horrid conditions they were living in down inside this basement.
Бить их не бьют, не трогают, но с ними разговаривают, проводят там политбеседы. Если их в Брянке уговаривали спокойно, предлагали там звание, зарплату хорошую, то здесь уже перешли на угрозы, статьи, что их посадят за дезертирство.
Он говорит, я не могу выносить, уже, говорит, нас оскорбляют, унижают честь и достоинство. Ребят, говорит, мам, я уже не могу так, говорит, общаться, как будто мы не знаем кто. Мы, говорит, там стояли, воевали 3,5 месяца. А обращение такое, что ужасное обращение, в общем.
Alright, so they just threw over these really quickly, and so I'm actually going to read these to y'all. This is what the son of that mother wrote from inside the basement after they refused to move forward. I'm sitting in a basement without food. They said they would keep us here for 2 days or so. Where to next? Unknown. I brought my phone here secretly. They took our things. The next bit of the message says, if they found someone's phone, they smashed it on the spot. We sleep on stretchers. There's no light. We're sitting in the dark. They said we would not be sent home. So you can see right there that there's a bit of a problem that the Russians are running to, at least on a moderate scale. We've actually gotten a couple of instances of this recorded on the news throughout the past 151 days, and we've seen another one right here where Russian soldiers refuse to move forward, and they then get arrested and thrown into cells. It's very interesting because it is showing that morale is apparently low, and that Russian forces do not want to continue fighting if they're even given the suggestion that they will be on their way back home. With that, we'll now be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian Mi-24 firing off rockets from an incredibly low level, literally right on top of this tall grass, which may be wheat. We now see the helicopter tilting up and firing off its rockets. And lo and behold, look what it is. It's the rare Ukrainian Mi-24, one of the same that probably launched an attack on the Belgorod oil refineries months ago. This is actually an Mi-24V, I believe, because we can see that it does not have the 30mm gun on the side. It actually has the 12.7 up in the front. Well, I believe it is actually around... well, anyways, we won't get into the calibers. One thing that's interesting to note, though, is that there's actually a couple of different kinds of Mi-24s, and we'll go over the two largest variants between the two, at least in what's actually built into the helicopter. There's the Mi-24P, which is actually incredibly common. If I can find y'all a picture, here's a good one. The Mi-24P has a 30mm gun that's mounted right onto the side of the helicopter. So imagine you're driving a car. This would be the best way to describe how this gun is attached. Imagine you're driving a car and you take a hunting rifle and you duct tape it alongside the side of the car, and so you can't really swivel it anywhere, you can just fire it straight forward. That's exactly what the Mi-24P has for a gun. There's another variant of the Mi-24 called the Mi-24V, much like y'all saw right there, which has the smaller chain gun mounted into a swiveling turret, so this gun can actually turn from side to side, but it has less firepower and it is a smaller caliber. So those are kind of like your two big differences in between Soviet-made Mi-24s. Of course, there are loads of different classes. I believe there's an Mi-24 VS. There's an Mi-24. There's a load of them. We won't go through all of them, but there is literally an endless amount of variants of the Mi-24. But the two major ways that guns were installed onto them were either in the swiveling turret, or as you saw with the Mi-24P, which we'll go back to right here, you have the 30mm gun mounted onto the side. Not trying to get too technical, but just thought I would explain that for a second, so that way when y'all look at an Mi-24, you can impress your friends and go, oh, look, it's an Mi-24P, and then they can respond, what are you, some kind of nerd? And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, and it was cool to see a Ukrainian Mi-24 in action. I'm not sure if they have a lot of those. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian grad at work from inside the cab. And so, here's the video. See them firing off the rockets. And that's the end of the video. Pretty nice to see that the Ukrainian artillery is still in operation, and it is good to know that the grads are still out there and pumping out the fire. We continuously see Western artillery systems being used more and more as the war goes on, but it's still great to see that some of those original systems that the Ukrainians relied on heavily, like the grad, are still out there and still being used, letting us know that those forces haven't been lost, and they're only being bolstered even better and stronger than before by Western systems. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian Su-25s firing off rockets towards the Russian front. Of course, we don't know where this was, but the site was nice. And so with that, here's the video. We see the first one rocket over, and here comes the second one, also firing off its rockets, and then taking a nice left turn and hitting the ground along with its friend. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and an incredibly nice one to see. Of course, we don't know if those rockets hit Russian forces dead on or how many forces they wiped out, but of course, the show of force by the Ukrainian Air Force is more than we could ever ask for, and it always lets us know that the Ukrainian Air Force still flies, still owns the skies over Ukraine, and that the Russians lie every single time they say they've wiped out the Air Force, which has been about 20 times. And so if I had a nickel for every time the Russians declare that the Ukrainian Air Force had been completely destroyed, I'd have about 20 of them, which honestly isn't that crazy. So with that, we're now on to the next bit of location unknown news. Here we can see 15 Russians being obliterated on film. Now, this was actually accompanied by a phone call of a Russian soldier that had to go and clean up this mess, because I'll have y'all know... Oh man, it did it again. The video froze. One second, everyone. Let me try and see if this will fix our problem. Okay, it looks like it did. Okay, so now let me explain to y'all. This phone call is of a Russian soldier that had to go to this tank and clean it up. Based off of the story, this tank had 15 soldiers sitting on top of it watching a film for movie night. And the Ukrainians decided that movies were too much and it was bedtime. And so they decided to drop a bomblet onto the tank, which then exploded and killed all 15 of the soldiers that were sitting on top. So here's a video of that drone hitting the tank. And also the phone call up top. There are subtitles below the title you'll see right now. And so I'm going to click play and let y'all see those subtitles.
Сегодня у нас такое шапито было в 2 часа ночи, блядь. 15 двухсотых. 15, ты прикидываешь себе кино.
А что так много, Юра?
А потому что они, блядь, танки смотрели и все кино, нахуй. Короче, в башню скинули, блядь. Дроном, мама, дроном, это пиздец, это просто.
Дроном, да?
Ага, просто подлетели, скинули, нахуй, боеприпас, нахуй. Его разорвало, всех разорвало, ну ты понял, да?
Now, just to add a little bit to this footage, the bright white things you see in the field, right here, where my mouse cursor is, over here, right here, right here, and right here are some of those soldiers that just got blown off the top of this tank. And if you watch, we won't rewind due to YouTube. I don't want to harp on this too much, but you will see them take flight. And so this is definitely the video of those 15 soldiers and their final moments alive while trying to watch a movie. And it looks like the Ukrainians got the drop on them. This kind of lets you know that you shouldn't be grouping up soldiers in the wide open where they're visible during the entirety of the war. And I don't really think anyone will be around to learn from this lesson, but here's the rest of the video.
Сегодня, мы сегодня кости собирали, это я тебе говорю.
We now see the drone dropping another bomb.
Маму, ты там только папу, блядь, ему дорог, чтобы он, блядь. По поводу войны откинул все эти мысли, потому что, ну, везде, короче, блядь, ебать, мы пизды получаем. Мам, короче, сегодня у нас такое шапито было в 2 часа ночи, блядь. 15.
And so now the video appears to loop a second time, and so we're going to save ourselves a little bit of time and not watch the thing on rewind, but that was an entire 15 soldiers killed. We don't know what their jobs were. We don't know if they were all tankers that had gathered around that single tank. We don't know if they were an infantry unit that climbed on top of the tank. We don't really know the exact story behind who those 15 soldiers were, but 15 is an impressively high number. That's about the size of a platoon or an entire squad, or maybe more than a squad. I believe it'd be about a squad and a half. But still, that is a high amount of losses that the Russians just took in a single instant right there. 15 soldiers. Just to put that into perspective, it would be incredibly rare for the United States to see 15 soldiers dead. Well, in fact, I never think we saw 15 soldiers get killed in a single day in the entire Iraq war, or the U.S., I guess you could say, involvement in Iraq after the war, and also the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, just stuttered through that lasted around 20 years. And so we saw more losses in this single clip than you would see in a single day in either of those wars by the Americans. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a little bit of a twisted barrel. Now, Matthew, if you would like to tell me what is wrong with this artillery piece.
I wonder what's wrong. I really can't tell.
I wonder. You know, honestly, it looks like Bugs Bunny showed up while they were firing this Molka and stuck his finger in the barrel and it exploded.
Buddy Chungus, did you do that?
Sweaty Chungus, did you do this? Just in case if y'all don't know and you're a little new, by the way, please make sure to subscribe and support tonight's fundraiser. But to explain this, we have a viewer called Sweaty Chungus, and just in case y'all aren't up on memes, the Chungus is a big version of Bugs Bunny. And so he's been around for an incredibly long time, and that's what we're talking about, just to give a little bit of a reference there. But that doesn't look normal to me, and I don't think the Russians will be getting incredibly accurate artillery fire out of this artillery piece again. By and large, I think some insurance is going to have to be claimed on this, and yeah, I just don't think this will be used again. Anyways, pretty funny little thing to see. Glad to know that the Russians are having defective barrels, and if we put 2 and 2 together, if the barrel was made like this one here, which we will load, if the barrel looked like this, I see how it went from this to this. It seems like a logical step in that direction. And so that's the end of the video. Well, that's the end of this location unknown segment. It's not the end of the video by any means. But that is the end of the location unknown segment. And we've had some pretty interesting stuff to look at today. And of course, some pretty good news. With that, we're now going to start moving towards the Kharkiv, Izium, Balaklia, and Kramatorsk area, as well as Lysychansk, since I kind of screwed up the scheduling for the night. But before we move on, we're going to take a look at that fundraiser, and we're also going to answer 3 questions from the chat. And so without further ado, Matthew, what do we have?
All right. So, folks, our goal tonight is $5,000 for Doctors Without Borders. And at current, we are sitting at $4.4 thousand on the fundraiser. So we're getting very close to that goal. We just have $600 more to go, and we will have reached the goal. But as you know, just because we reached the goal does not mean you still can't donate. I think last time we got up to like 14,000, and we had a $5,000 goal then as well. So it could go much higher, but great work on the fundraiser, and we'll probably reach that $600 probably in the next 20 minutes, I'd imagine.
And I gotta say, that is insane. We're just $600 short of the $5,000 goal already. And that's insane, really. And so I wonder, can we get to the remaining $600 before this question segment is out? Can Lee Spring Army do it? Usually we do. You know, just saying in advance. But I want to see if we can do it again, because it's always crazy to me. And so, with that in mind, I actually want to address something real quick before we move on to our top donors. I saw someone say that we apparently lost more than 15 soldiers in a single day somewhere in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not going to say who they were because it was a little nastily placed, but we will look into that. Highest casualty day in Iraq. Let's see how many. Let's see. Okay, we're not really looking for the civilian casualties. Let me go down here and look real quick. Iraqi war logs. We're not looking for Iraqi war logs. We're looking for the American war logs. Do we have those? Let's see. According to the 4,000, including killed in action and non-hostile, 31,000 wounded in action as a result of the war. There were 74 total deaths and 298 wounded in action. See references for a breakdown. Let's see. Looks like we can't really get a figure. Let me try and look through here. Want to get an accurate figure for this. So just hang on, everyone. We're going to try and make sure that I wasn't saying anything wrong. Coalition military casualties. This is what we're looking for. Wow, look. That's crazy. Ukraine was actually involved in the invasion of Iraq, and they actually managed to lose 18 soldiers during the war, which is kind of crazy. I didn't even know they were a part of the coalition that went into Iraq. I thought it was just the US, the UK. I knew the Polish were there, and I also knew that a couple of countries like Australia was there as well, but Ukraine was not one of those countries that I remember being on the list, which is kind of crazy and kind of a credit to how they've been trying to be in the Western spheres since pretty much their inception. So let's see here. We want to find... Now looking for insurgent casualties. It looks like they didn't really give us a list there. It looks like they're not really giving us a breakdown by day. So let's see if we can find... let's see. May was the deadliest month, with 17 combat-related casualties and an additional 8 non-combat deaths. According to this, 17 combat-related casualties in May of 2009 was the highest amount of casualties we ever took in a single month. In 2009, 149 troops were killed in Iraq, the lowest annual rate of U.S. military fatalities since the invasion in 2003. Alright, so deadliest day for U.S. in the Iraq War. Alright, so this article is from January 27th in 2005, and it says, Iraq, U.S. helicopter, let's see, mission crashed amid sandstorms, killing 30 Marines and 1 Navy sailor. The military said making the deadliest day for U.S. forces since the invasion. And so I was incorrect. We apparently did lose more than 15 soldiers on a single day in the Iraq War, and it appears to have been in a helicopter crash from a sandstorm in Iraq. So, sorry about that. We wanted to make sure to make the correction there so we weren't saying anything incorrectly. So thank you very much for bringing that up so that way we could correct it. But still, considering that when you look at the normal breakdown statistics, and 17 soldiers lost over an entire month was the highest casualty month of 2009, but it was still one of the lowest casualty months of the entire, well, one of the lowest casualty years of the entire war, that still puts into perspective how many soldiers the Russians are losing in single instances, like that tank. On top of that, we lost 149 troops over the entire year of 2009. The Russians lose twice that in a single day as this war keeps on going. So that kind of puts into perspective how poorly this war is really going for them, but of course, wanted to make sure to correct a fallacy if we did have one. And so with that, let's hear our highest donors in this fundraiser.
All right, and before I move on to list off our highest donations in the fundraiser tonight, real quick, Ronald Boyer told me to wish Zahir a happy birthday. And Zahir, if you're on the stream, we hope you're having a happy birthday, and thank you for contributing to tonight's fundraiser as well. And also, I want to address the poll that I put up before I take it down. I asked everybody, which helicopter would you rather pilot? It looks like 66% of you said, yeah, 66% of you said the Apache, 21% said Black Hawk, a mere 9% said the Huey, and only 4% of you said the Hind. And for the record, I actually voted for the Black Hawk. I think that's one of the coolest helicopters ever made. And I'm sure that's going to be controversial, kind of like the opinion on the A-10, but that's what it is. I'm not sure why everybody likes the Apache so much. Maybe I'm not clued in on something.
The Apache is pretty good, but honestly, I would have voted for something that wasn't even up on the poll. And if everyone would entertain my geek side for a second, I would like to introduce y'all to a helicopter that never really flew beyond testing, which is the AH-56 Cheyenne. This was what was supposed to be the replacement for the Cobra in the U.S. Army before we adopted the Apache, but sadly, due to some internal politics in between the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army, the Treaty of Key West, I highly suggest y'all pull it up. It's an incredibly important treaty in between the Army and the U.S. Air Force. They weren't able to implement this thing into service, but this thing was unbelievable. It over-excelled in everything. I mean, like, this actually, even in its prototype phase, put the AH-64 to shame. It had an impressive top speed. I'll actually try and give y'all some of the stats here. You can see that 10 of them were built. I don't know if any of them were still around. Let's see here. Let me look. Was winding down. They canceled the Cheyenne program. That was sad. Let's see here. Let me look. Let me try and go through here. Flight testing. You can see one of the prototypes of the Cheyenne here. But man, I gotta read some of the stats off to y'all here. So the maximum speed of this helicopter was 244 miles per hour. And its cruising speed was 224 miles per hour. And if we compare that to the AH-64, which I'll show y'all here. We go here, and then we go down to the stats. This thing's just got books written on it. So we'll go down to the stats. And we can see here that the maximum speed well, the maximum speed of the Apache is 182 miles an hour, and the cruising speed is 165. And so you can see that this thing was leaps and bounds faster than the AH-64. Not only that, but in testing, the kind of, I forgot the exact name of the kind of lifting principle it used, but because of the lifting principle that the AH-56 Cheyenne used, it could carry a whole lot more ordnance than an AH-64 or any kind of conventional helicopter could. And on top of that, it was also able to carry them off center. If y'all don't know, helicopters are incredibly sensitive to their center of mass. And so if you put like 4 Hellfires, let's just take that as an example, 4 Hellfires on the left pylon, but you leave the right pylon completely empty, that will affect how the helicopter flies, and so you'll have to balance it out by making sure that the armaments are evenly laid out on both sides of the helicopter. The AH-56 Cheyenne could have massive disparities in its center of mass, either to the left or the right, and it didn't really matter, and on top of that, it was also able to carry more weight. And so you can kind of get an idea that this thing was incredible. And I still think to this day it would be a very good helicopter design to try and implement if the Air Force and the Army could get past the politics of the Treaty of Key West. The reason why Key West comes into play, just to explain why I keep on bringing that up, is that the Army and the Air Force made an agreement, which was called the Treaty of Key West, which is what I keep on referencing, that the Army would not adopt any fixed-wing aircraft because that would defeat the purpose of the U.S. Air Force, or it wouldn't get anything that could do the same job as a fixed-wing aircraft. This helicopter was so effective in its job in testing that it looked like it could put the Air Force out of operation by and large, rather than its strategic bomber force and such things like that. And so, of course, the U.S. Air Force made a huge rigmarole. They were like, this thing is going to put the Air Force out of business because it's just so good at its job. Something needs to be done about this. This can't actually go through. And so, for the internal politics of that reason, this project was unfortunately canceled. But it was an impressive helicopter, and I would have voted for this if it was an option on that poll. But with that, now that we heard that, let's talk about our top donors for the night. And also, Matthew, could we get a big yeehaw from you? Because we just passed $5,000 and got to 5.3. So give us a yeehaw, Matthew. All right, you you went out after the yee. All we heard was the yee, and then it went out.
All right, let's try that one more time.
I mean, now we couldn't hear the first part, but we got the yee and the haw in separate bits, so everyone just put that together in your minds, and we got that yee haw. And so with that, let's go on to our biggest donors again.
All right, so it's now time to list off our top donors for the night. We're currently sitting at 5.3 thousand on the fundraiser, and first up, the biggest donation of the night is from Betty Lou, who puts in an $800 donation. Very generous, and thank you so much, Betty, for that. Also, we have a $300 here I go again saying super chat. A $300 donation from Ronald Hugendorn, or Hugendorn, one or the other. And a $200 donation from Paolo Corradini, Enforcer for President, BC Skyman, as well as a $135 donation from Rick McGee, a $100 donation from Dima Tikachenko, Zuan Tran, Brian Springborn, as well as a $50 donation from Igor, Heather Fitzgibbon, Ashley, also Ruben Coolidge, Justice Ryan, Caffeine, Orlos the Druid, Sharon Tukolsky, BSG Wolf, S. Moore, also known as the Sockeye Salmon, and Santiago Flores, Axel K., Shannon Alaminsky, Redwood Beard, Kaltenberg, and Teresa Andrioli. So thank you very much to all of you for your support, as well as our other donors that we did not list off, but we just always like to recognize the top donors of the night. But we thank everybody so very much for your generosity.
And of course, I would like to make a special note as well. Without the Lee Spring Army, it wouldn't be possible to reach these goals every single week and help out the Ukrainians in this way. I don't know of any group, or any channel out there for that matter, that has continuously fundraised for Ukraine over the entirety of the war. I know there's probably some out there, I just don't watch enough to find them, but there is no group that is better or more pure intention than the Lee Spring Army, and I've got to thank you all once again for being a member of our community and helping us to be able to do these kinds of things. If it wasn't for y'all, this wouldn't be possible. And so thank you to every single one of you once again, and of course to our largest supporter of the fundraiser tonight, Betty Lou, for putting in such an incredible amount and helping us to raise another $5.4 thousand as we stand right now for Ukraine. The fundraiser is not closed, everyone. We still have ongoing it's still an ongoing fundraiser, and you can still throw in donations if you would like. And so please make sure to throw some in if you would like. It helps out Ukrainians on the ground, and it helps them to get the urgent medical care they need. And so with that, if we could get a Least Spring Army and LSA in the chat for reaching our goal tonight, I would be more than happy to see that. And so with that, we're now going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the next bit of news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And also, real quick, I want to give a shout out to Junebugwood the 72 on the end, who put in a $72 donation, funnily enough. So thank you very much for that generosity. And we are now up to 5.5 thousand on the fundraiser. So here's a new yeehaw. Yeehaw. Since the mic broke on the very loud one, I'll resort to that one, so that way you can hear it. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with the Lego, stepping on the Lego yeehaw. So let's see here. Let me get a little organized. My spreadsheet's a jumbled mess tonight. So up first from our question segment, we have actually one super chat that snuck in right as the stream started from Kaltenberg, who put in a $20 super chat and said, Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine. And thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg. I, of course, would have loved to have seen that go towards the fundraiser, but of course, you've always supported our channel, and I thank you once again for somehow finding a way to get around the fundraiser tonight and send in a super chat, because it shouldn't be possible, but somehow only you, Kaltenberg, can support the channel on a Sunday. So thank you once again for the support, and also, Slava Ukraini. And so with that, of course, huge credit to Kaltenberg for being such a huge channel supporter. Been around forever, and has always helped us out, even when they shouldn't be able to, like today. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support, Kaltenberg.
All right, and next up, we have a question from Richard Sears, who says, Enforcer, how is the Ukrainian Navy doing?
The Ukrainian Navy is practically non-existent, and so there's really no way to say they're doing good or bad. It's, they're mostly coastal patrol boats, and so it's not exactly like they're going to go out and fight the Black Sea Fleet or anything. And so I would largely say I have a neutral opinion on that. They're not doing terribly. They're not doing great. There's not really much they can do anyways, because they really don't exist. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and we are on to the next one.
Also, a big shout out to David Hollinghurst for putting in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. Thank you very much, David, for that. And moving on, we have a question from Antonio Marmot, who says, if Ukraine uses their missiles to attack mainland Russia, Crimea is an exception. Will Russia treat the U.S. as an enemy, and will the U.S. join the war? Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini. And to answer that question, I think that if the Ukrainians use missiles to attack Russia, that would, of course, be against the agreement that the United States and Ukraine has made if you're talking about American missiles being used. And so the Americans might withdraw their support from Ukraine and start diplomatic apologies to the Russians for that happening, since that is an agreement that they made with the Ukrainians. Or there's always the flip side. The Americans could double down and say, we sent weapons over with an agreement, but that doesn't mean anything. They could just use them however they want, and you'll just have to live with it. And then we could see the Russians probably back down, because while they're giving a lot of threats, the Russians know that a conventional war will end with them losing. Whether they start a nuclear holocaust or whether they lose in a conventional war, they will be on the losing side of that conflict. And so I think that by and large, they most likely wouldn't go to war even if American missiles were used against Russia by the Ukrainians. But then again, I could be wrong, and they could just decide it's an all-out event at that point, and they just have to go to war and hope for the best, even if they know they'll lose. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are going to move on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to move on into the next segment of news.
And also, Enforcer, I'm trying something new. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go, folks.
Okay, that one sounded really weird. It's like you went like techno yeehaw. Like it was like, yeehaw. It's like that.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, we actually route my call through Discord. That's how I connect into OBS. So that's probably the reason why it's cutting out. My mic is actually the same as the Enforcer's, so I'll have to look into changing some settings so that way we can get that yeehaw in its full effect. But on to our last question of this segment. We have a question from Tarina McKenna, who says, I donated $20, but forgot to write a comment. Can you see who has been following y'all and since when? Because I've been watching since around February 24th. God bless you and thanks.
And I thank you so much for the support. And to answer that question, we cannot see everyone who's subscribed. We can only see people who have publicly subscribed. And so we have seen, you know, we can see some people. We actually have someone who's subscribed to the channel that has like 300-something thousand subscribers, because usually it sorts it by channel size that's subscribed. But we can see a lot of people. I don't know if we can see you, though. And there's a lot of people who've been publicly subscribed, so there's like thousands. But I would maybe try and look through it eventually. I don't know if I could ever find the time. But I would try and eventually look through it and see. And that is interesting, since you've been watching around February 24th. That's something pretty crazy, because there wasn't a lot of people watching then. We blew up on the 4th day of the war, which would have been February 28th. So if you have been watching since then, you are a real trooper. You've been around before we were even really a big channel where a lot of people were watching us. And so thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we've reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a question, we may get to it by the end of the night. We don't have any super chats tonight, so we're going to be answering nothing but questions from the live chat. And so if you've ever wanted a question answered, now is your time. The cards are stacked in your favor. There are no super chats we have to get to tonight. All live chat questions will be, well, as many as we can will be answered. Not all of them, because we get around 8,000 live chat comments a night. But without further ado, it is now time for us to move into the next question segment of the news, which is in the Kharkiv, Balaklia, Izium, Kramatorsk, and Lysychansk area. And so without further ado, let's scoot on over into the Kharkiv area and see what's been going on. And it appears that the Azov Battalion in this area has conducted some firefights with the Russians today on film. And so here's the video. We can see the Azov soldiers walking through the brush. You can see them getting ready to pick out their firefight. You hear some rock music playing, and now you can see that the firefight has begun. The Azov is spraying the tree line in front of them with a machine gun. We now see the machine gunner moving forward, and now getting below a broken tree, now crawling across the ground with a machine gun. And you now see one of his friends crawling up alongside him. We now see them moving around in the brush, and that's the end of the video. Pretty interesting to see. We did see them engage a little bit with the Russians, but not a lot. It was kind of a small little shootout, nothing too big, and it is good to see that the Azov Battalion in the Kharkiv region is still carrying on some activities and making sure to let the Russians know that their time may be running out. With that, we haven't heard of any offensive or defensive action happening in the area. We did see that the Azov got in a firefight on film, but it's not suggesting any larger offensive actions. And so at the moment, we think that this area will largely be in some kind of a stalemate for some while, because that's what it's been like for months at this point. Moving on into the Stary Saltiv and Chuhuiv area, it appears to be the same. There's a large reservoir dividing the Russian forces from the Ukrainians, and so I believe, and there's a pretty good basis for this, that the Russians nor the Ukrainians will be launching any offensives from this area, because there is a massive several-mile-wide reservoir dividing the two sides. Now that we've moved on from that area, we're now going to move down to the area of the famous 93rd Brigade, and we saw today that they did carry on a little bit of action as they shot down a quote-unquote invisible drone. And as the caption reads here, soldiers of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade, Kholodny Yar, shot down a Russian Zala drone, which the Russians called invisible. This was reported in the Operational Command East. And as we can see here, there's the drone. So let's pull up that specific drone, the Zala drone. Here's the drone. Let's go here. The Zala is a micro-air vehicle developed and produced by the Ivzesk-based Zala Aero Company. It is a small, portable, and reliable UAV platform. Weighing only 9 kilograms, it includes 2 aerial vehicles, compact ground control station, 2 spare power supply kits, and a backpack container used for transportation. Zala 421-08 is designed for frontline reconnaissance, overground, and overseas surveillance. It takes 3 minutes to prepare Zala for launch. The UAV is operated in the autonomous or semi-autonomous mode. When you see that the Wikipedia article doesn't really say a lot about it being stealthy, and I would have to say that this thing looks kind of goofy. It looks like an RC, one of those styrofoam RC planes that you get as a kid with a camera mounted onto it. So Russians are putting a little bit too much faith into this thing, and based off of what it says right here, so the caption didn't say anything about this being a suicide drone, but if we back out for a second, the Army Technology website says this is a high-precision kamikaze drone. Let's click on this real quick and look at this. That's not even the same drone. We'll accept the cookies just for the hell of it. But that doesn't even look like this. Does that look like the same drone to you, Matthew? Because that doesn't look like it to me.
No, that looks like some hobby shop thing right there.
Yeah, this looks like something you buy from your local hobby store. Jeez.
And there was that one crashed in that last photo?
Yeah, this one splattered into the concrete.
Huh.
Let's read this for a second. I'm kind of interested about this goofy thing. The Zala KYB, I think that's a totally different one. Also known as a Kub BLA. Wow, they got a whole lot of names for this. It's a new loitering munition system and developed and manufactured by Russian Zala Aero. It was a subsidiary of Kalashnikov Group. So I'm guessing Kalashnikov Group is their version of Johnson & Johnson, the family company. And so they run ads on Russian TV where they're like, Kalashnikov Group, a family company. Because they've got subsidies that make drones, but the Kalashnikov Group largely produces small arms. Anyways, we're going to move on. I'm sure that someone's about to say, they don't just produce smaller, you know, there's, we'll address that when we get there. I might be wrong with that statement, just keep that in mind. 2019, the loitering drone is operated by the Russians. The military grade, oh, man, you know, I hate when people say military grade like that's a high honor, because it is true that most weapons are made cheap and mass produced, even the US ones are, and so military grade is a step below civilian, or normal grade. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. That's why when I see military ads, ads on TV that say military grade in them, I avoid those products like the plague, because I bet you they're not good. You can ask anyone out there. A Humvee breaks down all over the place. And usually everything that the military gives you, regardless of what military you're serving for, isn't exactly the best. You can get better quality out there in the normal world. But anyways, the military-grade drone can deliver a variety of weapon payloads with high precision during military operations based on manually set target coordinates, pretty much telling you they guide it right in with a remote control or image-based target guidance payload. Wow, that's a mouthful to pretty much just say it guides itself. It can be used as a suicide drone or kamikaze drone to effectively destroy small-sized targets on the ground and sea. You know, I just don't like how military articles are worded much. Does this get to y'all a little bit too? Because it always feels like they're trying to add as many words and make things sound as neutral and clinical as possible, when you could say the same sentence like, it could be used as a kamikaze drone to attack soldiers, small boats, and maybe a truck, or something like that. They always have to say, small-sized targets on the ground and sea. And it's like, why? I think that's just a small little gif on my part. It just annoys me for some reason. Let's see. Ukraine claimed to have shot down a Zala KYB drone equipped with an explosive device in the Poldyatsky district of Kyiv in March 2022. Well, they shot down another. We saw it right here during the Russian invasion that began in February. We're not going to read the rest of this because I feel like I'll just get into a massive lecture on why articles were written that way. But still, it's great to see that the Ukrainians shot another one down. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news. Credit to the 93rd Brigade for that little kill. And with that, we're now going to move on down to the next bit of news in the Izium area. Now, I just saw something that I'll have to refute until the day I die. Someone just said military grade electronics is better than civilian. In some areas, yes, but have y'all seen what the ICBM batteries are working off of? Like, they're working off of 70s computers, and so I would agree with that in some regards, but that's not always across the board. Also,
At least it'll be waterproof.
that's true. I mean, like, that's pretty true. And another thing that I'd also like to bring y'all's attention to is that, do y'all notice that every time you use a government computer, they're always using Windows 95? That's about how the technology sector in the government is run. And I feel like, although I haven't had a lot of experience with military computers or anything like that, I feel like that would just kind of extend over into the military as well. Let me know in the comments if that's true. Because I would like to know. But I do see a lot of people agreeing that military grade isn't really the best thing. So I'm glad to know that a lot of people agree with me on that. But with that, we're now going to move on into the next bit of news where we can see that the Ukrainians were hitting the Russians where they shouldn't be hit near the Izium area. According to the caption here on this video, the 3rd Armored Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, along with the Phoenix Drone Group, fired drone-corrected artillery on a Russian position. Although the Russians are supposed to have an electronic anti-drone warfare system here, that would make this impossible. Yet the drones persevered and still managed to hit this ammo depot or this warehouse as we see here. We now see the artillery hitting the depot, and it looks like it's hitting it incredibly well. Incredibly accurately, too. The artillery just keeps on landing accurately, and I'm sorry if I'm not commenting a lot. I'm trying to read the live chat as well and see what a lot of people are talking, or a lot of people are saying about military computers. And in fact, I would like to throw up a poll for the veterans if we could, real quick, Matthew. And let this be the question: are military electronics usually outdated compared to civilian electronics? And just make it a yes or no answer, and let's see what we can get back from the veterans. I would like if non-veterans did not answer this survey, because we would actually like to get an answer from the veterans themselves as to whether in their service was the technology dated or not. Because,
and also, Enforcer, right before you said that, I actually put a poll up of a slightly different question, but along the same line somewhat.
Interesting. Oh, what was that one about?
Is military grade equipment better than comparable civilian equipment?
And what was the results of that poll?
It actually just went up.
Oh, let's see that right here. Let's see. Is military grade equipment better than comparable civilian equipment? Yes, mil spec for the win. Huh. I would I hate to say this, but I have to disagree with what everyone's saying off the bat, because I'm telling y'all something. If you get these $400 M4 from an army arsenal and compare it against the civilian grade, you know, of course, way over engineered, like Daniel Defense M4A1, the Daniel Defense, I promise you, will outdo it, at least in the long run. In the short run, they do the same job. In the long run, I could certainly see a civilian grade thing doing a lot better than the military. That, by and large, that usually just stands out throughout all of time. That's usually why a lot of people in prior wars would try and have their families send them over stuff for them to use instead of getting military issued stuff. Like, for example, in World War II, it was common for soldiers to write home and try and get a 1911 from their family. Sometimes that's because it wasn't issued. Other times that's because it was better. So, it kind of depends. Of course, it being better than what they were getting in the military is a very few and far in between example, especially in World War II. It was mostly because the pistols weren't being issued to those specific soldiers, but still, it's interesting to see And a lot of people have a lot of faith in mil-spec, because over my time growing up, I was told, and I have seen a lot of instances of, civilian made is a whole lot better than mil-spec. The military does not have an incentive to make things high quality because there's no competition. The civilian world does. I would actually like to hear your opinions on that, Matthew, because while I have my opinions, I'm not really sure if you agree with me or not, because we've never really talked about this much.
I personally think that military grade equipment, from a toughness standpoint, is better than civilian equipment, just because the military supposedly makes things, or at least buys things, to last in really rugged environments. Although it may not be the best performance-wise, it's going to last.
Interesting. Let's see. Mil-spec is not as good as high-end. Mil-spec stuff handles really rough environments and is well screened and tested. Some stuff has to work first time, every time. That's true. So I can't get behind mil-spec with that. I lived it. Blue Flam 777, longtime channel supporter and legend, says I lived it. Mil-spec is not better. And then also someone on top of him said, this guy, Wicked Knowledge at its best. And then he's got a veteran right below him saying, mil-spec is not great. So, let's see. I want to read a couple of more of them. The U.S. must have a weird government. Let's see. Okay, I will say this. I don't know if this is a state thing. It was most likely a state thing, but the state of Alabama uses incredibly outdated computer systems. I actually used to work for an institution of the state, and I was in there, and they were using Windows 95. And I don't know if that's something that extends to federal government institutions, but going off of my experience in Alabama, government computers are way behind. Those were about 10 years behind the times, at least. But it's interesting to see everyone's inputs here. Let's see, depends on the item. That's true. It's not really an across-the-board kind of thing, and it's kind of phrased that way, but of course, in some instances, it's going to be far better than the civilian alternative. Let's see, no one would consider an M1917 junk. No one wouldn't. I can agree with that. The government was so embarrassed that they were forced to increase the cybersecurity group's budget. People who hate on the... I don't have enough info to have an opinion on this. That's fine. Sometimes I don't either. We use Windows 10. Well, Scott Moore says they use Windows 10. And that's about as modern as you can get. So, I mean, that's not that far behind the times. That's up to spec. And then someone said, that was Alabama. Well, yeah, I know. That's why I was bringing that up. I mean, like, if you... not to get rude here, but if you listen to what I was saying that may be just a state of Alabama thing, not a federal thing. Then someone said, I missed Windows 95. Anyways, we're getting sidetracked here. I've got to continue on with the news. We haven't heard any offensive actions or defensive actions occur in the Balaklia and Izium area, but we have seen a little bit of a resumption of activity like usual. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bits of news down in the Kramatorsk area, where we've seen some sad sights of the Russian attacks and what they've caused to the town. Here we can see a destroyed school in the Kramatorsk area.
Luhansk and Donetsk region, Ukraine. Early in the morning of 21st July, the Russians bombard the school. The roofs and the fences of the many houses are missing. The owner of one of them has left. My husband and his friends were repairing the roof of this house today.
And so with that, you can see that another school has been destroyed. Hopefully there were no students inside. We are hoping that, although that may not be the case. And so you can see more damage, of course, there in Kramatorsk. And that's not the only damage we saw on film today. We also saw someone film the shattered out windows in their apartment block here in this clip as well.
Kramatorsk, Donetsk region, Ukraine, 21st of July, 13 minutes after 4 a.m. My mother looks at her broken windows. At first, by phone to me, she spoke calmly. Then she cried and shouted. This is what hysteria looks like.
Вот тут, вот так.
So with that, that's the end of the video here, and it is, of course, unfortunate to see that the damage does continue all over the place, and it seems that there's really no end in sight, of course, for Ukraine. Hopefully the Russian ammunition can be blown up before it could be used in the ammo depots, so that way we'll start to see less and less artillery barrages, and the amount of damage will start to remain a constant. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kramatorsk area, and we're now going to be moving up towards Lysychansk. But before we move out of here, we have not heard any reports of actions from the Cave Monastery, the area around Liman, or the area of the, I guess you could say, the northern side of the finger on the Seversky Donetsk River. It appears that this area has fallen quiet today. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the Lysychansk area, where we have seen that the Russians are not having a good time. And I'm just going to let y'all see this here, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. Russian soldiers are getting shelled incredibly close. You can see that pretty much the explosion happened right outside the building.
Сука, что-то прилетело на. Мне тоже прилетело, блять. Блять, у нас прилетело, Богдан. Блять, сейчас, погоди секунду, разберусь, наберу. В спину? Блять, висок. Кому еще что прилетело? Давай, да. Забираем оружие, нахуй. Ебать. Блядь. Оружие забираем все. Давай. Сука, нихуя себе. Я хуй его знает.
So it looks like by and large, you're not having a fun time.
Ай, блядь. Вроде все. Так, разведвзвод, что у нас? Сука.
Мне кажется, что-то в жопу вылетело.
А?
Мне кажется, что-то в жопу вылетело.
Бать, наушники, сука, за полтос нас заебали гандоны, блядь.
Well, you hear the hard bass start playing at the end of that little video, but still, looks like the Russians didn't have a fun time. It looks like they were a little shaken up by that artillery, and of course, in typical fashion, instead of trying to hunker down or run to a safer place, they just decided to start trekking it out in the wide open where the artillery just fell. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news from the Lysychansk area, where you can then see closer to the front lines that the Ukrainians were able to escape some artillery fire today. This is a little bit of a long video, and we did kind of see this yesterday, but this is extended footage, and so I thought I would definitely show this to y'all, because it shows more of what happened in that area. Also, Tito McLovin, that's a great point. And of course, I'm not talking, when I say civilian grade versus military grade, I'm actually talking about when things are comparable, just for y'all to know. I'm obviously not talking about a civilian grade Minuteman is going to be better than a military mil-spec Minuteman, because there's no comparable comparison. I'm talking about in things like small arms, gear, and stuff like that. Is civilian grade better than military grade? Or if you're going into the electronics area, which is a lot of people are talking about right now, is civilian level electronics better than military level electronics? And so with that, we're going to let this video continue. We see the Ukrainians moving around in the trench. And we see that there's a little bit of smoke being kicked up here and there. Well, dust, really, from the ground. And you see a Ukrainian soldier taking a drink of water right here. You now see an artillery shell hit Looks like it hit right over the dugout. I couldn't really tell if it hit in it or over it. Let's go back real quick and check and see. You see the soldier right there, and the shell lands and hits just right over the trench, right here in this little, I guess you could call it peninsula of high ground. When you see that the next round, though, did land right into the center of the trench. We don't know if the soldier that was there survived or not. He may have been just around the corner where he received some pretty bad wounding. But then again, if you're that close to an explosion, sometimes it's not the shrapnel that gets you, it's just the concussive force, which can cause massive internal bleeding. We now see that footage where it picked up yesterday, where the Ukrainians are carting on a wounded soldier to a car to get him out of here as fast as possible. We now see the car. They're loading the man into the car, and they're now going to take him out of the area while still under fire. We saw this yesterday. So we're actually going to be skipping forward a little bit since we saw this clip yesterday. And we can see here in the next clip a Ukrainian soldier. You have a group of Ukrainian soldiers digging a trench, and it appears they're digging it with shovels or doing some maintenance to the trench that was already pre-made. And that's a Ukrainian soldier coming out of a trench. We're going to skip forward a little bit for the sake of time. We now see these Ukrainian soldiers moving out of the trench, and it looks like an explosion just occurred right in front of them. We now see a soldier braving through the thing and running on through. We now see the other soldiers behind him moving on up through the cratered field. You can see that they've moved across the entire field and they're now into the tree line. Wait a minute, Matthew. Hang on. We're going to have to stop this video because I just saw something that was really kind of funny to me. I'm not gonna say who it was that said it, but I saw that someone said most AR-15s can't run 5.56, too much chamber pressure. And as I know that you're a person who uses a Daniel Defense M4A1 and shoots nothing but 5.56, I'm gonna let you answer that one for a second.
I have to say, I'm not sure who said that, but to put it kindly, that is a little false.
I would definitely have to agree. And so with that, we're going to let this video continue. Now you see the artillery coming down all over in a typical Russian way, just carpeting an entire area with artillery. And I'm starting to see that, and I don't mean this in an incredibly rude way, but I've seen that a lot of experts that have been telling me that either civilian or military grade is far better and far worse are not understanding that 5.56 and 2.23 are literally the exact same round with different names on them. If you pull up a 5.56 versus 2.23, I'm about to blow y'all's world. They're literally the same, as you can see right there. An AR-15 can shoot both 2.23 and 5.56. They're literally the same. That's like 308 versus a 7.62. So just letting y'all know that right now, and it's kind of a little interesting. And a lot of people are saying no, they're not the same. If you load these into an AR-15, they're both going to work. That's what I mean. There's no such thing as it's chamber for 2.23 or 5.56. They literally can chamber both the same. Matthew, just letting y'all know, Matthew has an AR-15, and we've shot over thousands of rounds out of that thing, and we've shot both 2.23 and 5.56 out of it, and never had a jamming issue once. And I know everyone's saying they're not the same, but someone's saying they're saying, well, you can fire an AR-15 that's chambered in 2.23, but they're really chambered for 5.56, but we've shot both of them multiple times, and so I don't know where that's coming from. So with that, and now I'm seeing a lot of people saying 2.23 and 5.56. You can't just reload 5.56 military rounds. They are not the same, but yes, they both work. They are not the same. They differ in beveling. Maybe not correct use of literally. And it's probably not the best use of literally, but still you can use them in the same gun. And so saying that one's chambered for 5.56 versus 2.23, pretty much you can use them both. You can use 308 and 7.62 by 51 in the same way as well.
And I will say, personally, me, I usually run 5.56 out of mine just because I like to baby my gun. But do not put 2.23 in your AR-15 unless you're certain it can handle it, just as a disclaimer.
And so with that, we're now going to get off of that now that we've started another firestorm in the chat. And people are either saying, yes, you can use it, or no, you can't. And we're now going to be moving out of the Lysychansk area and behind the lines, where we've then seen a cheap show. I would like to show y'all something that is a lot better than my live stream, in fact, and I think they're about to steal all of y'all. This is a propaganda, well, not really a propaganda. I guess you could say this is a USO show, the Russian equivalent of it, that's been put on for Russian forces in the Luhansk area. And I'd like to ask y'all, do these people look like they're having fun or no? They look like they're having fun. Now the video loops, and I would like to point out one thing. I don't know how they got the truck here, because when you look at the tires, they're deflated. All of them are deflated. Like they're running on flats. I don't even know how the truck got out of this field or how long it's been there, but this is certainly the saddest USO show I have ever seen. And it's not of course, it's not a USO show. It's a Russian propaganda show. But golly, these people are not having it. These people are not buying it. They're not having fun. And even at that, it's just lame. This is pitiful. And so with that, we're now going to move out of here from this sad show. And now you can see what the Russians are fighting for, which is a boring show made from the back of a flatbed Russian truck. And we're now going to start moving out of the Kharkiv, Izium, Balaklia, Kramatorsk, and Luhansk news. And we're now going to start moving down to the southern front and cover the news here. But of course, before we get here, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat and also see how far the fundraiser has gotten. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we are currently sitting at 6.3 thousand on the fundraiser, so we are 1.3 thousand above goal. Also, I want to give a shout out to I'm Your Huckleberry for putting in a $125 donation, as well as Roman Salamaka for putting in a $72 donation. So thank you very much to both of you for your donations. And also thank you to everybody else for getting us to that $6.3 thousand figure. And so with that being said, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go on ahead.
So I was actually about to move on to the question. So if you have something you'd like to add, you can go right ahead.
Oh, nah, it's fine. I'll make sure to add on to it at the very end. But with that, let's get into the questions.
All right, so jumping right into the questions, we have a question from Keith Graver, who says, have you heard information on Chechen rebels attacking Moscow?
I have not. I have seen some rumors and talks about the Chechens thinking about maybe moving into the Moscow area and doing some questionable things, and also maybe starting up another Chechen war. But by and large, I think that's something that the Chechens are talking about that are within Ukraine, and not really something that's getting a lot of traction or a lot of coverage within the Russian world, I guess you could say. So I haven't really heard about that in a large amount, but it does seem like it is going on in the background, and there are little rumors going on around it in the Ukrainian Chechen community. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And also, folks, one more note about the sort of debate we were having a minute ago about AR-15s. Always refer to your manufacturer's guidance on your weapons. Don't put any calibers that aren't recommended for your gun in your gun. I think I misspoke a moment ago. I had it the other way around. You can have, or you can shoot a 223 out of a 5.56 gun, but not the other way around. I think I said it the opposite a moment ago. I didn't catch it, but that is just a disclaimer once again, so we don't give out any wrong information here. But moving on, we have another question from Mark, who says, to what extent can Putin prolong this war indefinitely, and how prepared is Ukraine and Zelensky to fight this war in the next 5 to 10 years?
The Russians technically could keep this war going on for forever, really, when you think about it. But the thing is that there are, of course, limitations and points of no return, where once they start getting close to them, they will have to eventually stop the war. One of these points of no return would be their economic, I guess you could say, condition. If they start to run themselves into the ground where they can't even meet basic needs like wheat manufacturing and foodstuffs, they're definitely going to have to start ending the war. Also, if they start to run out of contract soldiers and they begin to bring in conscripts, and they start to also run out of conscripts as well. And when I say run out of conscripts, of course, the entire army would not be wiped out, but I'm talking around 30% to 40% overall casualties of the entire Russian military. That also would end the war. Honestly, they can't go on for too much longer. There's a lot of things at play rather than just the magical they want to, and so they'll keep on going kind of stance. And most likely, they can only keep on going for another 1.5 to 2 years, in my opinion. But then again, things can happen behind the scenes, like the Chinese maybe stepping up and picking a side and actually supporting the Russians, that could keep the war going on even longer. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. Once again, that's just my opinion. It may be wrong, and I have noticed, and I was reading in the background, that apparently there is a small difference in between 223 and 5.56. Apparently 5.56 does have more grains of powder inside of it, and therefore operates at a higher pressure. And so you can fire 5.56 out of a 5.56 chambered rifle, but you can also fire 223 because it uses a lower pressure. But like Matthew was saying, apparently it does not work the other way around, and that's something I did not know. And of course, I'll claim ignorance and say that I was wrong on that, because my entire understanding, my whole life, because we had always been shooting 5.56 chambered rifles, and sometimes using 223 rounds, is that you could do that the other way around as well. And so I stand corrected. Just want y'all to all know that, so that way everyone isn't sitting there and going into a firestorm in the chat over something that I clearly had been misinformed and didn't really know exactly the details about. But with that, we are going to move on to the next one.
And real quick, I want to give a shout out to Anonymous. I hate they didn't put their name with the donation, because I would love to give them credit. They put in an $1,800 donation, but we don't know who did it. But we know you're watching, so thank you very much for your generosity. And it's even more generous that you don't even want recognition for it. So a very good-hearted person there, and thank you for your support of Doctors Without Borders and helping those in Ukraine. So moving on to our, I think this is the last one of the segment, we have a question from Good Karma, who says, I wonder how much of this equipment is built in the States. I see jobs, 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 which is good for America. And actually, I think we have, what was it, the Javelin is made in Troy, Alabama?
Yes, it is. The Javelin, just to let y'all know exactly where this comes from, Google Maps, well, actually, sorry, let me type in Troy, Alabama. A lot of the Javelins are actually manufactured here in the state of Alabama in the good old town of Troy. And if you're from Alabama, Troy's actually kind of known with a decent reputation, actually, which is kind of surprising because a lot of towns in Alabama don't get that kind of reputation like Montgomery. But Troy's actually known fairly well. And one of the coolest things about Troy is that they manufacture a large amount of the Javelin CLUs. I believe they may also... and I'm just guesstimating here, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think they may also produce some of the missiles as well. But I do know that they definitely manufactured CLUs. And so that's an incredibly cool fact about Alabama, is that we do manufacture the Javelins. I'll try and pull up some more information on that off of stream, but I don't want to spend too much time on it because, you know, of course we want to get around to answering questions. And also to address that comment, yes, that is definitely jobs. I don't know if the defense industry is going to get a definite and long time boom from this. This may be something that only lasts maybe a year, and I don't think that's long enough for the defense industry to really see an increase in spending and for a lot more jobs to be created. But I would definitely agree that for right now, these companies that are producing these weapons are certainly having a very good time, as they are most likely trying to fill orders to replenish America's stocks, while America sends over some of the older stuff that has been in the storerooms for quite some while. And so with that, I do entirely agree. Hopefully there will be a decent amount of people who keep their jobs, or maybe even people who get more jobs. And so with that, thank you once again for the comment. That was a very good observation as well. And so with that, we have reached the end of this comment section. Thank you all once again for throwing in some interesting questions. And also, we've had some interesting points of contention tonight, and I've actually seen that I was wrong on the 556 and 223 thing. Of course, one thing that's always interesting to me is that there is there's this kind of thing that I see every once in a while where people take grave offense to trivial topics. And I always find it weird because whenever I say something like that, it's like, oh no, it's not that way. Like, you could just explain it like that, but for some reason, sometimes it hurts someone's very fiber of their being to hear something like that. And I don't know why, but I always find it a little funny. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on into our last news segment of the night, which will include Mariupol, the southern front, Kherson, and also the center of the country. And then finally, we'll be moving on to the speech from President Zelensky and wrapping up our news segment for the night and moving entirely into the questions segment. And so with that, also, one second, we are going to do that real quick. We are now going to move on into the Southern Front news. We're going to be moving past the Donetsk area as we do not have any information from there. It appears that the front line has fallen silent and has largely fallen into a stalemate based off of the video evidence we've seen there. Moving on into Mariupol, however, we have gotten some footage from long ago. As y'all remember, the Mariupol garrison surrendered on May 17th, which has been 2 months ago, which is honestly insane to believe that was 2 whole months ago that Mariupol fell. But we actually got some footage from long ago of helicopters that were able to run the blockade on the city and were actually able to supply the Azovstal forces for a short while. Here's footage of an Mi-17 that landed within the perimeter of the Azovstal and offloaded some cargo. With that, that's the end of the video, and it is interesting to see because for a long time it was rumored that the the Ukrainians were supplying the Azovstal battalion by helicopter, but it was just believed that that would have been largely impossible. And in fact, I was on the channel saying that we had had no information to back that up. And after Mariupol has fallen, we've slowly been getting videos out here and there, very small trickle of it, showing that the Ukrainians had brave helicopter pilots who somehow forded over 50 miles of captured territory that the Russians controlled at the time to reach the city of Mariupol and give the defenders well-needed supplies. Which is honestly insane, and it's crazy to think that Ukrainian helicopters were not only able to conduct a raid on Belgorod, some 30 miles behind the lines, but they were also able to fly over some 50 miles of controlled Russian territory and supply the defenders at the Azovstal, because no one believed that was possible at the time, and it was a huge discussion on this channel as to whether there was a way to supply the Azov battalion in the Azovstal at all. And now we can see that the Ukrainians did apparently have a way, which was great to see, and it was wonderful to know that the Ukrainians never gave up on the Azov battalion and the Azovstal as a whole, and were continuously trying to help them out until the very end. They never left them to die, as we're seeing now as the news keeps on coming out. And so with that, we are now moving on out of this phantom of the past from months ago, and we're now going to be moving to the southern front where we've seen some news come out today. Most importantly, more Russian vehicles being destroyed. As we can see here on this drone film taken by a DJI Mavic, we can see that Russian vehicles are being hit on the very edge of this wheat field. When you see that one of the vehicles has decided to spontaneously combust, while artillery shells have thrown up dust over what appears to be a couple of other Russian tanks further back. With that, that is the end of the video, and I also just saw Matthew comment on this, and I was going to not say anything about it, but that flight path that drone's been taking has been pretty wild. It looks like it's gone over the same place like 11 times.
What kind of battery do they have in that one?
I have no clue, but it's only on 48% battery, and these people have been flying this all over the world, it seems, before this artillery strike actually happened. But still, crazy to see that they flew that thing around that much and have enough battery left, and also nice to see that they were able to fry another tank. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Southern Front news, and we're now going to be moving on into the Kherson area, where we've also had some additional interesting news. Starting off in the Kherson finger, we did see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a BTR-80 today with a Javelin. And so here's the video. I do have to mute it because of copyright reasons. But when you see the BTR-80 there, and the Ukrainians fire the Javelin. You can also see the Javelin in this next clip here, the white little dot flying up into the air, and then it comes right back down onto the BTR-80, slamming into it and destroying it. As you'll see in a second, fire engulfs the BTR, destroying it. Another APC destroyed, and hopefully another loss for the Russians that they will not be able to recoup. While these losses, of course, can be replaced, the question is, do the Russians have enough operational APCs and tanks anymore to replace these losses without anything being, I guess you could say, left behind in the long run? And the answer is no. We've seen them start to pull in T-62s from pretty much museum storage at this point, and so I believe that these BTR-80s at some point may also become irreplaceable as well. And so great to see, and I hope this does keep up. And further south, near the city of Kherson itself, we've also seen another little interesting event where several S-300s of the Russians were destroyed. We did see Ukrainian surface-to-air, Ukrainian S-300s being destroyed a little while ago by the Russians that had been left there for some time, but it appears that the Ukrainians got the drop on the Russians today and were able to destroy actual Russian surface-to-air missile batteries, specifically these S-300s, and we can see the aftermath of that attack right here. And so, here's the video.
О, как горят они. Красиво горят.
I would have to say, and I would just like everyone to know this for certain, I think the civilian-grade S-300s are in fact way better than the military-grade ones. As we can see, the military-grade ones right here apparently have a tendency to get blown up, and the civilian ones, on the other hand, are usually more durable. Well, that's the end of the video, and in all seriousness, it's great to see that apparently an entire S-300 battery was wiped out by Ukrainian fire. We don't know what kind of artillery caused this, or if it even was artillery, but we can certainly tell that the aftermath was good, as an entire battery went up in flames. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the last bit of news from the Kherson front, where we can then see some civilian-grade HIMARS firing at the Russians. Now, we can tell that they're civilian grade because the lines that the missiles are firing in are so much straighter, and military grade HIMARS just cannot do this kind of thing. And so with that, here's a video of these wonderful civilian-made HIMARS. You can buy these at your local store, firing at the Russians. Now, I can't tell you how many HIMARS are in the distance, but based off of this, maybe 2. Nice to see that the HIMARS are still in operation by the Ukrainians. They have 16 of them right now, and they're about to get a whole other 16, bringing up their HIMARS inventory to 32 HIMARS. Hopefully this will help them to change the tide of the war, as we can already see that 16 of them are doing a load of work inside of Ukraine, and hopefully helping them to push the Russians back. With that, to speak of the Kherson area, we have heard some indications and some news that the Russians may be on the defensive right now, and the Ukrainian counterattack may have begun in full swing today. We have gotten indications from that from the president in his speech, which we'll be getting to here in a bit. But we're not entirely sure, and we're going to give it a day to make sure that that is correct, because it's been said before. We already heard that the counterattack had been going on, but apparently that was the lead up to the attack. And so this time I would like to make double sure that this is definitely the counterattack before we say that this is it. The Ukrainians are going to be pushing towards Kherson. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of this area of the country in the Kherson region, and we're now going to be moving up more into the heart of the nation. Here we can see that the beehive was nearly hit by a Russian cruise missile. I guess you could say that the inaccuracy of this Russian missile is unbelievable. And I guess you could say that the bees were... I guess you could say that the bees found this to be a bit of a stinging miss. You see the explosion in the field right out there. Of course, we can tell that no one was wounded or killed, as there was nothing out there. But these bees definitely got the shock of their lives. Also, you can see a lot of people now talking about their favorite caliber. Mine, honestly, is the 800 Nitro. I believe that's the perfect one for home defense. With that, we can see, of course, that it got incredibly close to the beehive, but of course, there is no way that this would be a hit. The Russians just cannot hit crap, even if it's a beehive. And also, the other thing is that apparently the Russians got the whiff of news that this beehive was full of drones. And just in case you all don't know, worker bees are actually called drones, and so I guess they were trying to take out this massive drone factory, or drone farm, I guess you could call it. But, of course, they missed as usual. With that, we're now going to be moving out from this bit of news and on to the next bit, where we can then see a bit of an unfortunate occurrence where the Russian cruise missile slammed into a school in the center of nowhere. And when I say in the middle of nowhere, I mean literally, if you look at the map, it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, here's the video of this school being hit by a cruise missile dead on. It's always unfortunate to see stuff like this. I believe that the school is not in session. It doesn't appear that there's any cars outside or any sign of people walking around, and so I'd largely assumed that the school was out at the time. And of course, it looks like dawn, and so hopefully there was no one inside to be wounded or killed. But once again, the Russians deliberately targeted a school with not just one but 2 missiles, and we can now see the aftermath from the ground right here.
Ну стой, я пройдусь. Блять. Ой.
Here's one of the massive craters caused by the missile that slammed right near the school.
О, там кто-то есть.
Hey Matthew, just checking real quick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me check something on the stream. Can everyone else hear me on stream? We're going to pause here for a second because YouTube's telling me that we're apparently having a problem with something, and I want to make sure that y'all are able to hear us on stream. So let's just give it a second, and let's see if y'all can, because right now the YouTube studio is telling me that the current stream's bitrate is 0, which is, of course, lower than the recommended bitrate. Alright, so everyone can hear us. Apparently the YouTube studio is doing its own thing, so I'm going to let the video continue.
Блять. Спортзал. Окна повылазили все. Тут целенькие. Аж сюда залетели осколки. Мелкие камни. Бля. Ну, с этой стороны целая осталась. Это не то, что третье.
So with that, that's the end of the video, and an unfortunate reality of the war is that as long as it keeps on going, the Russians are going to go out of their way to deliberately target civilians, and I hope that the Ukrainians hold these Russians accountable for what they're doing, everyone from the top to the bottom, and make sure that these people end up in prison for life. With that, we have now concluded all of the news around the country of Ukraine, except for one little bit, and I thought I would share this with y'all before we move on to the speech from President Zelensky. In the town of Krasnodar, we've seen an interesting occurrence of the fruits of war, and when I say fruits of war, I mean literally. We actually saw today that apparently the Russians have stolen watermelons from Ukraine and have brought them to Russia to be sold and slapped Z stickers onto them. You can't make this stuff up. There's not really a lot to add here. I just thought I would show that to y'all because it shows that the Russians are even stealing simple things like watermelons out of Ukraine. And so with that, we now have covered all of the news for tonight's stream. We're now going to go up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelensky, and after we cover the speech, that will signal the end of the news for the night, and we'll then move into a question segment and answer as many questions as we can, and then we will round out tonight's stream. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Завтра починається важливий тиждень, символічний. Тиждень, коли ми вперше відзначимо День української державності. 28 липня. Вперше відзначимо у час такої жорстокої війни на 6-му її місяці після 8 років війни на Донбасі. Але відзначимо, попри все, бо українців не зламати. День української державності буде утверджувати зв'язок українців, які живуть тепер з багатьма поколіннями нашого народу. Понад 1000 років державотворчому досвіду українців, нашій культурі, нашій самобутності, українському характеру. Зараз у багатьох подвигах наших воїнів, у мудрості наших людей, у боях, навіть просто в розмовах звичайних українців про те, що відбувається, ми можемо побачити, ми можемо почути і зрозуміти приклади таких же характерів, але сотні років тому. Можемо побачити приклади такої ж хоробрості, такого ж ставлення до життя і, найголовніше, ставлення до України і до ворога. Лише ті, хто абсолютно не знає правди історії і абсолютно не відчуває її сенс, могли прийняти рішення атакувати нас після усього, що пройшов наш народ, після усього, чому ми навчилися за століття. Українці ніколи не віддадуть своєї незалежності і не зламаються зсередини, як це бувало не раз, ні цього разу. Берегти єдність зараз і працювати разом на перемогу – це найважливіше національне завдання, яке всі ми обов'язково виконаємо. А отже, зможемо зробити те, що не вдавалося зробити раніше, попереднім поколінням. Це стосується і нашого захисту в цій війні за незалежність, і нашого руху в об'єднану Європу до повноправного членства в ЄС, і нашої здатності стати однією з найбільш сучасних держав світу. Немає зараз тих, хто в цьому сумнівався би. Є лише ті, хто сперечається, як цього досягнути. Це ознака віри в Україну. І не тільки нашої власної віри. Навіть окупанти визнають, що ми переможемо. Ми чуємо це в їх розмовах постійно, у тому, що вони розповідають своїм близьким, коли зв'язуються з ними. Тож, не розслабляємось, і як кожного дня протягом 5 місяців робимо все, щоб завдати ворогу якнайбільших втрат і щоб зібрати для України якнайбільше підтримки. Цього тижня будуть важливі візити партнерів, будуть важливі переговори, і найважливіше буде подальше просування українських позицій на фронті, в дипломатії, в економіці. Я вдячний усім, хто захищає нашу державу, і бажаю усім нам, усім українцям, результативного нового тижня. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of President Zelensky's speech here on day 151, and that wraps up the very first day of the 6 month of news in the war. And I thank you all so much for watching the news segment. Of course, it has been an absolute pleasure to cover the news tonight, and we've actually had some interesting discussions, and I have actually learned a little as well. So with that, thank you all so much for coming. If you did enjoy the news segment, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as these streams do run every single day of the week except for Mondays. And we also upload daily summary videos as well every single day of the week except for Mondays. Thank you all once again for watching. And with that, we're now going to hand it over to Matthew to tell us how far the fundraiser's gotten, our largest donors, and also segue us into the question segment. And so without further ado, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so we are currently sitting at 8.3 thousand on the fundraiser, so well above that $5,000 goal. And we actually, rather than that anonymous donation for $1,800, haven't had any extra large donations come in as of recent. But we have had a lot of smaller ones come in, and I want to personally thank all of you for your support of the fundraiser and helping us reach that $8.3 thousand figure. And for the moment, that wraps up all the info on the fundraiser.
All right, and with that, I also would like to address one comment here. I actually thought this was a great one. Nick Blaine, to give credit to someone who's brought up a great point, that is the Trump card, he said High Point totally ruins the mill versus civilian argument. And so, if for that reason, I'm going to have to completely backtrack and say military grade is a whole lot better than civilian grade, just for that reason alone. And so with that, we are going to move on into the question segment and answer all of the questions we can.
All right, so up for our first question for the final question segment, we have one from Leonce Pierre, who says, Enforcer, number 1, thank you for showing President Zelensky's speeches, and number 2, is it me, or are President Zelensky's last couple of speeches more passionate as of late, almost angry?
I would say that they're not more passionate. Oh, I wouldn't say they're more angry. I would say that they're more passionate. Almost mixed up my words there. I would say that they're more passionate, but not really angry. It seems like the conviction for what they're doing has become a lot stronger as of late, but I have seen it ebb and flow in waves. It seems like when things are starting to pick up for them, you see him pick up passion, and when you see things start to go not necessarily in their way, like the loss of Lysychansk, it seems like there's a little bit of a loss of passion and maybe a little bit of dissuasion. But a lot of people, everyone in the world, it goes through kind of like ebbs and flow of getting really impassioned about something and not. But I do see what you're saying, and I would have to agree. It does seem like he is getting a little bit more passionate as of late, and that may be because of the incoming or the current successes that the Ukrainians are having in the Kherson area. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next question. I hope that does answer that one, at least in my opinion. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Quantum Fighter, who says, Enforcer, is there any sign that the newly appointed commander-in-chief of the Russian Fed, you know, the one big one with a camo tent for clothes, has changed tactics, etc., and if so, how has it shown in the war?
Well, actually, it turns out that the big Mr. Lunchtime looking guy apparently was never really put in charge, and that was something put out by the Russian government to throw people off, from what we were told. It wasn't any kind of Ukrainian propaganda. It was actually officially stated by the Russian government, and then we found out about a month later that they never even appointed the guy to be in charge, and they had come up with that whole entire thing on their own. So we don't really know who's in charge or what they're doing, but if you could reread that question to me, Matthew, I might be able to answer it at least in a small way.
So let's see. They said, Enforcer, is there any sign that the newly appointed commander-in-chief of the Russian Fed, the big one with the camo tent for clothes, has changed tactics, etc., and if so, has it shown in the war?
Now, they have changed tactics in a small way, and it was in the Lysychansk area a little bit earlier on. They were able to blow through the Ukrainian forces using a new tactic of using paratrooper units to push through the lines and then mechanized units to exploit the openings. We did see that, but beyond that, we haven't seen any new tactics being fielded by the Russians so far during the war, and so I would largely have to say no. Rather than that one, we haven't seen a broad new playbook of tactics and strategies being used by the Russians to try and fight, win, or even defend. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as we are able to know. And I see that one of our Discord mods, Caffeine, is getting into a slugging fest with Monty's 420 because Caffeine has shot a gun chambered in 223 with 5.56 rounds, and he's still here. And so that's actually interesting, but I'm not going to weigh in on that anymore. Did see that according to what I was pulling up in the background, I was at least incorrect technically, although Caffeine does have a different experience, and I'm not going to discredit that, because if he was able to do that, then it actually can happen. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a one moment here while I get rid of a bot. Up next, we have a question from Livonia Livin, who says, Enforcer, can the cooling liquid inside a Javelin targeting module be refilled?
That is something I'm going to have to claim ignorance on, and these are the kind of questions I generally move away from, and this is kind of the reason why. I don't get into a lot of explicit, in-depth details. That's also why I could get things wrong, like 223 and 556 and how it works technically on paper, is because I don't really get into deep details like that, and I usually don't have a lot of time to do that. I usually look at overarching history as strategy and things like that, and how it played out in the big picture, but sadly I never really get into great detail like that on a specific system, and so unfortunately, I hate to say it, Livonia, but I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one, because I just don't really know. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. I'm sorry I couldn't answer it, but I'm sure there is someone out there in the live chat who probably can.
And up next, we have a question from Ryan Coop, who says, Enforcer, after seeing that news broadcast, do you think the Russians will take it to such a degree that Russia would break up into individual territories?
Could you reread that one real quick?
Ryan says, Enforcer, after seeing that news broadcast, do you think the Russians will take it to such a degree that Russia would break up into individual territories?
No, they would not break up into individual territories. What they would most likely do is, let me think. they would most likely break up into nothing, really, because I'm trying to think about this, and I've covered this before, but in that perspective, no, it would most likely involve a large government change, like some kind of a coup or an overthrow, and then the government would just switch. There's really no way that the Russians could break up into smaller entities and still be successful countries. It would be much like Wales trying to break out of the United Kingdom. While Wales could be its own nation, economically it would be very difficult for it to survive. So that would be kind of the same thing with the Russians. If, for example, Novgorod, what used to be Novgorod up in this area, tried to break away and create its own country, there's just not enough up there economically to make it successful. And on top of that, there's not enough differences culturally to make that work either. And there's very few places in Russia that could do something like that. An example of that would be Chechnya, just as one. So unfortunately, they wouldn't break apart into a million pieces like Austria-Hungary after the war. They're just too culturally homogenous at this point for that to be possible. There's not enough rifts there for that to happen. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Tony Ania, who says that attitude of just keeping the war going may just end with the Fed of Russia breaking apart, hopefully. What are your thoughts?
We kind of answered one similar to that just a second ago. I don't think that the Russian Federation is going to break apart into multiple pieces. They're just too culturally similar for that to happen. If that was going to happen, it most likely would have occurred during the breakup of the Soviet Union, and we didn't see that then, and I don't think we'll see that in the future. I think the best thing we would ever see is something like the Chechnya or Dagestan breaking away and creating their own country, but then again, that's even questionable at this point. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Robert Gandera, who says, if possible, can you double check the list of weapons being sent? I've seen a list before that says some of the items may have already been sent and some additional will be on the way.
Could you reread that one real quick? Because I'm looking at the live chat and also trying to look in there real quick. So could you reread that one?
Yes, Robert says, if possible, can you double check the list of weapons being sent? I've seen a list before that says some of the items may have already been sent and some additional will be on the way.
Let's reread that again and let's read the exact text just to make sure. All right, so committed to Ukraine includes on July 22nd announced $270 million in additional security for Ukraine, including our drawdown for security assistance valued up to $175 million, as well as $95 million security assistance initiative funds. The United States security assistance committed to Ukraine includes. The language here is a little ambiguous because it seems like it could be suggested that this is what they're sending over, but on a second read-through, it could also be suggesting this is what has been sent over. I'm not particularly sure if it's trying to say this has been sent or it is being sent, it is going to be sent. So I'm going to... Because one thing that was interesting, I will say this, is that some things were being directly doubled. And so I would say I would be leaning more towards on the side. This may be a list of everything that has already been sent. Because we've seen that 2 NASAMs are in this list, and we know that 2 NASAMs are already over there, and we know that 16 HIMARS are moving around the country right now. And so we also know that there are 16 of them exactly over in Ukraine right now. And so this is probably a list of the equipment that is already over there. Although the language in here and how it's been written makes it kind of seem, on an initial read-through, that this is what's being sent over in the $270 million of additional security assistance instead of what's already been sent over. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. Considering the numbers are kind of lining up here with what's already there, I would lean on the side more so now that this is apparently what has already been sent over. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are on to the next one. And I just saw we had an appearance of the rare bot.
Yes, we had one visit from the Cambot. So Cambot equals 1, just for the record. And moving on, we have a question from Karen Vaughn, who says, it seems some areas of the front line are stagnant. Why isn't Ukraine taking advantage of that fact, and why not push forward?
Some areas of the front line are not advantageous to push through. For example, the area near Balaklia, there's really nothing to gain behind the lines rather than some villages. And while it's of course important to liberate all of Ukraine, it's important to liberate places that will provide some kind of advantage. For example, larger towns first, and also areas of the front line that can be exploited. Also, one other thing to know is that the Ukrainians may also be running a little bit low on supplies, just like the Russians, and so they have to weigh in what front lines they're going to conduct offensives in, much like we would have seen in World War I. You did not see the entirety of the front lines in World War I go into action all the time. It would be an area like Verdun, which would be a small little area about 40 to 30 miles in length, and so on. That's generally how battles are fought as wars continue, is that they're not fought all at one large ongoing pace. They're kind of fought in place to place, area to area, and so that's why we may be seeing a large amount of static parts of the front and neither side committing any actions there. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as my opinion, and giving a little bit of historical precedent to it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Fern Joseph, who says, can you ask the enforcer what he thinks about a twin-barreled howitzer?
Real quick, before I answer that, I actually thought of something that I was about to address before. I actually saw a viewer, because I had weighed in on one of our Discord mods saying something to a viewer, and that viewer said I was agreeing with them. I was not agreeing with you. I was actually agreeing with the Discord mod. So I want to clear that up, because I was thinking I kind of left that hanging on accident. So just wanted to say that. But with that, we're going to move on to that question. So can you reread that again to me real quick?
He says, what do you think about a twin-barreled howitzer?
I don't think that would necessarily be a smart thing. Just in my opinion, we've never really seen that implemented before, and I don't know what kind of advantage would be given by a twin-barrel howitzer. I feel like that may be a little bit over-engineered, and I feel like you would just get two. You know, for example, if it was a double-barreled M777, I feel like two normal M777s could really just do the job of one. Because you would still have to have pretty much the same crew for two on a single M777 to reload both of them, or else it would be too strenuous for a single crew to do. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Samsung Note, who says, how much did Russia lose in the Afghan war?
The Russians lost a pretty good bit in the Soviet-Afghan war. Let me pull it up real quick so that way we can get some specific numbers. And so let's see here. It was a Mujahideen victory, of course. The Russians aren't there anymore, as we can tell. Let's see, casualties and losses. Apparently, according to the numbers that are stated here, the Mujahideen may have lost 90,000, including 56,000 killed, 17,000 wounded, or it could have been anywhere in between 150 to 180,000 casualties. No one really knows. And that's kind of that thing, you know, it's like if people are talking about the casualty numbers in Ukraine are inaccurate, the Ukrainians are over-reporting. Do we really know? Because we don't even have accurate numbers on the Soviet-Afghan war, you know, just putting that out there. But when you see that the Soviets lost 14,453 soldiers over the total of 10 years in Afghanistan. One important thing to note about these kinds of wars though, is that they're usually not that high casualty compared to conventional ones. They usually just last an incredibly long time, are economically taxing, and are also a constant burden and just generally a problem for the sitting government, and that's usually what leads them to be more, I guess you could say, morally inflicting on a population like Vietnam was to the U.S. and the Soviet-Afghan war was the Soviet Union, than a normal war, because they're not high intensity and last for a short time. They're low intensity and last for an incredibly long time. And so I hope that answers your question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Fatso Ferret, who says, I keep seeing a lot of stuff about HIMARS. Can you please make a video explaining why giving 100 of them to Ukraine is not useful? I would love a video to point out when it comes up.
I couldn't really give an answer as to why 100 HIMARS would not be useful. I actually feel like that would be incredibly useful, as you could start using them to hit units on the front lines if you wanted to. So I unfortunately wouldn't be able to make a video on that. And on top of that, I don't have enough information to know why sending over 100 HIMARS wouldn't be useful, or why it would necessarily be useful. So unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to make a video like that. But we are thinking about making more videos in the future on other topics, mostly pertaining to war. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I thank you for asking that question.
And next up, we have a question from Frosty Flake, who says, Enforcer, have you seen new helicopters that will be new Army and Marine choppers? The final competition is not done yet.
And is he talking about U.S. Army helicopters?
I believe so.
Unfortunately, I haven't seen them. Usually I don't follow that stuff too much because some of those programs just get scrapped even after a whole bunch of bidding. Like, a lot of y'all may remember the Comanche helicopter. The Comanche helicopter right here. That was supposed to eventually go into service, and I remember when I was a kid, everyone was like, oh, this is the future of attack helicopters for the U.S., and it wound up just being canceled. And so I don't really follow them too much. I just wait until they finally go with one, and then they say, oh, this is it, you know, this is what we're doing. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's the helicopter, or that's the tank they're getting. But for now, I don't really look at them, and sadly, I don't know a lot about them. So I'm going to have to plead ignorance on that. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Sweaty Chungus, who says, Enforcer, any update on the munitions or tank engraving? If you mentioned it already, I didn't catch it.
We don't have any updates yet. We're trying to still figure out a way to get that done in the background, trying to figure out how to set up an account, and we're going to be contributing a decent amount to that as well once we get that on the ball. But we're most likely not going to do that on a live stream where we, like, where we pay for it on a live stream. It's going to be made into a normal video and then upload it like that, where you can see the whole thing from start to finish in a single video instead of just, you know, doing it over multiple streams where it's piecemeal. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. That's kind of the direction we're moving in right now, and hopefully we can get this on the ball within the next week. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from BC Skyman, who says, did you guys hear about the Israeli destroying the drone factory in Damascus, Syria?
I did not, actually. Unfortunately, our scope does not extend beyond Ukraine right now. And so, unfortunately, I don't follow a lot of international news at all. So, and of course, because of that, I have not heard about the strike on the drone factory in Damascus. But if true, that's not really too bad of a thing, in my opinion. Damascus is controlled by the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, and so destroying a drone factory that's under their control would be a necessarily good thing because the Russians support the Assad regime. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, BC Skyman, and thank you very much for being a channel legend. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Ryan McBride, who says, do y'all think Ukraine will build a fortified border similar to the Maginot Line?
I don't think so. Defensive fortifications like that are somewhat dated because wild trenches and stuff are not dated because you can quickly dig those and they can be flexible to the situation. Concrete defensive structures and large networks like that are certainly dated at this point. There's no country that does that anymore. And of course, that's because everyone learned with the Maginot Line, you can just kind of, you know, go around them or you can punch through them. The Germans started to do that later on, but I don't think they would do something like that. And also, I think one thing that would definitely hold them back is the cost. They share over 1,000 miles of border with the Russians, and that's in comparison to the French, which in the area of Alsace-Lorraine, they only had, let's see here. Oh, we could just do that. They had around 190 shared miles of front line with the Germans, and so that kind of puts into perspective how economically difficult that would be for them to do, and so I largely believe that they would not do that, just for the costs, and also how warfare has changed in a way where that would not necessarily be to their advantage. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Smart Lucker, who says, Enforcer, completely fictitious scenario. Say you are the president of the USA right now. What steps would you be taking to ensure Ukraine's safety? And thank you for the daily news.
And I thank you so much for enjoying the daily news. And to answer that question, I think as president of the United States, I would first get in and make sweeping reforms. To start off like every president ever says. But to answer that question in all seriousness, if I was the president of the United States right now, there's not really a lot extra that can be done to help them out rather than sending over more military aid. You could, of course, increase that number. You could try and make trade deals with them. We see that the shipments of grain are entirely not for Ukraine's economic advantage. They are just to make sure that the food is eventually shipped out of Ukraine to the countries that need it. And so sadly, there's not a lot we can do there right now. That would have to be something agreed upon by the Ukrainians and the Russians in between themselves. I think that tariffs could be dropped on Ukrainian goods entering the United States. That may be a World Trade Organization issue, though, because they have a base tariff amount. We could incentivize trade with the Ukrainians. We could maybe drop... Maybe the Ukrainians, we could give the Ukrainians an offer for them to drop tariffs on our foodstuffs, and we could start shipping food into Ukraine if there's any food shortages with that. There's not really a lot extra one could do. So, as President of the United States, the first thing I would do outside of Ukraine, just to try and add in something a little bit more interesting to this, and try and add into the war in general, is that at this point it seems clear that the Germans, kind of moving out of the actual borders of Ukraine and to help out with the war effort, the Germans could do more. And so the United States could indirectly help them to send more. The reason why the Germans may not be sending a lot is because they are scared that they're going to piss off the Russians, and the Russians will cut off the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. And so what I would do is that I would ramp up oil production in the United States, not for the purpose of lowering prices here, but to make sure that there's a lot more available oil to export to the Germans. The Germans then could be liberated for the time from the Russians and the fear of them cutting off the gas and, of course, shutting off their power grid in the meantime, and they could be brought more into a Western sphere of influence, and also that would be, of course, overall money, money gained by the United States due to trade with the Germans and, because of that oil. And so we would bring the Germans more under the Western sphere of influence by that addition. We would also be increasing the economic output by the United States by a considerable margin, and we would also be allowing the Germans to have more political leverage to send over more support of their own. And so I think, as a creative way to try and get more support to the Ukrainians, that's what I would do at this point. Now, I'm not weighing in with that answer on American politics, over here, because I know that the whole gas and oil thing is kind of a big deal. I'm weighing in on the best way I could see, all political things aside in the United States, the best way I could see to get Ukraine more support regardless of how it had to be done. I think that would be a pretty solid way to do it. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, and we're on to the next one.
And if the enforcer ever was president, I would have to insist that he turn the national animal from the bald eagle to the honey badger. I think that'd have to be the first thing on the list. That would be done on the first day in office by executive order.
Also, the other thing that we would do is that instead of having the eagle with the arrows in one claw and the olive branch in the other, it would be a honey badger, and it would be holding up both of its hands like it's attacking you, but there would be leaf springs in both of them. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
Yes, and I can totally get behind that. And moving on, we have a question from Tobias Augustin, who says, do you see a way or a golden bridge for Russia to exit or stop the war without losing too much face before they are pushed into a corner full of nukes?
Sadly, there's really no way for them at this point to not lose face. They have already lost face by the embarrassment of the war that has been going on. For it to have only been estimated to be a 3-day to a week-long war, and we're now 6 months in, that in itself is already, by default, an embarrassment. And so, to answer that question, I don't think there's really any way out for the Russians anymore that would save them face, because any way to step out would make them lose even more if there's any left. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Daniel Kolita, who says, do you think Kaliningrad could separate from Russia?
No, I don't think so. I know it's geographically separated from the Russians, but at the same time, it's just, I don't think it would be possible. I'm trying to figure out a best way to explain it, because my gut feeling is no. But man, I mean, like the Russians could really, if anything started to happen, there was civil unrest, they could just fly in soldiers. And while they're not good at fighting wars, they are of course great at putting down civilians. And they could go in there and they could just put the people down that are rising up and trying to make Kaliningrad independent. And so, for that reason alone, I would say no. And of course, they are geographically separated from the Russians, and that would make it a lot easier for the Russians to put them down, as the word and also the people of Kaliningrad couldn't really spread their stories and horrors among the rest of the Russians because they're geographically isolated from them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was actually the last question that I had for the night. Well, actually, we have one more. We have one from Danny, who says, Enforcer, if mealtime was traveling on a train at 100 miles per hour, how long would it take to derail? And Danny, that actually sounds like a math question that would be on a test in high school, and that brought back really bad memories.
I don't think I can even answer that one. I'm not, can you reread that one more time?
Let's see here. Danny says, if mealtime, I think he meant to say lunchtime, was traveling on a train at 100 miles per hour, how long would it take to derail?
Oh man, it would depend on if he walks on the train. If he walks down a rail car, it's going to derail instantly. So it really just depends on how easy it is for him to sit still. But really, if he trips and falls in front of the train will derail right on the spot. And so with that, I hope that answers that question. I'm actually going to take a second to read a couple of them out of the live chat, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. So with that, let's see. National animal require an act of Congress, I think. Yes, that's true. And I saw that a lot of people took that seriously, and
that's just a joke,
yeah,
people. I'm not actually talking about just replacing it with a honey badger. That was just a channel joke.
Yeah, we were just joking right there. Don't think if we actually became president, we're going to be replacing the bald eagle with a honey badger. That's just asinine and silly, but that was kind of the point. You know, it was a joke. Sometimes I actually wonder if, anyways, we'll move on from that. Let's see. The population of Kaliningrad was deported and replaced with ethnic Russians. That's true, actually. That's something really interesting about Poland as well, is that all of the former areas of the German Empire were usually depopulated and either repopulated with Poles or just left empty. And so there's actually a big disparity in between Western Poland and Eastern Poland, because although the Germans were pushed out and pushed either into East Germany, or they just ran across the border after they got pushed out of Poland and went into West Germany, the Poles and that kind of like inhabited this area afterwards on their own, they still hold over a lot of the, I guess you could say, Germanisms that lasted in this area for hundreds of years. So I hope that does answer that question, and let's see if we got any new ones coming in. Let's see, I see Hoodoo Texas talking about rifle. So what's the point? I'm not American, so I'm all for the honey badger, lol. Well, you know, it was still a joke. Enforcer, I hate Eagles shirt coming when? Not soon. I'm actually a pretty big fan, honestly, of the bald eagle. I think it's a beautiful bird, and I've seen it a lot of times in real life. And I have to say, it's quite an eagle. It's quite an eagle. It's quite a bird at that. It's huge. Thing's got like a wingspan of 12 feet.
Enforcer, we actually have a question from the Vladinator, who says, I asked a YouTube channel, shopped and hard to find food in Russia for $2 a day. As the home of revolution, would hunger cause unrest?
Yes, hunger always causes unrest. If there's any kind of famine going on, it takes an ungodly amount of like I guess you could say Orwellian control to stop a revolt from happening in that kind of situation. You can look all throughout history, and every time there's a famine, there's usually some kind of revolt or a revolution. In 1917, World War I, a little bit of a hunger problem, Russian Revolution. The French, a little bit of a famine, on top of bad economic times, revolution. It always leads to a revolution. And so to answer that question, historically, the precedent is that if there's some kind of famine, it does have usually some of the perfect elements to cause an uprising. That's not always the case, as we can see the famines in Ireland in the 1840s did not cause an uprising. Well, at least a large one that was successful. So I believe it may have not caused one at all. I think the Sinn Féin riots happened in the 1740s, and then the Easter uprisings of 1916 or 1915. I'm not really sure which year that was, but that occurred during World War I, and I don't believe there was an ongoing famine then. So I think that the Irish revolts were largely separate from famines, and the famines were just almost on their own. So it doesn't always lead to revolts, but when there's a perfect storm brewing, much like there would be in Russia right now, I do believe that famines and hunger would lead to revolts and riots and such things like that. So I hope that does answer that question. And then let's see here.
I see a live chat question from Kim Jong-un's, the plural version of Kim Jong-un, who says, Enforcer, what's the possibility of Belarus joining Russia entirely in this war, and could it happen anytime soon?
I don't think it's going to happen at all, and I also don't think the possibility of them joining the war is high. As y'all may remember, just to jog everyone's memory, just 2 weeks ago, we were once again talking about the Belarusians were about to join this war any day now, and look at us now. It's completely disappeared again from the news. It's completely disappeared from what Lukashenko's saying, and they've gone into obscurity again. I think they do that to just freak people out, and I think that they're never going to join the war because the Belarusian military is not dedicated to this war. We've already heard about the supposed rumors of mutinies within the Belarusian military, and also they're incredibly small, and the amount of forces they could field would be insignificant compared to what's already involved in this war. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question, and we are going to answer one more, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so,
right. So I'm scouring through here to see if I can spot one. Let's see here. I see one from Daniel Colita, who says, Enforcer, do you think that Belarus could have a revolution despite having the leaders jailed in 2020?
Man, I'm not really sure with Belarus. It's a largely quiet country, and I don't know a lot about their, I guess you could say, social scene right now to say whether a revolt would be in line or not. We know that the military has pretty much outright refused to go into Ukraine, and so that shows that there is a bit of a division in the Belarusian government that could lead to a coup or an uprising, but at the same time, the Russians would step in and probably crush it, and then make sure that Lukashenko stays in charge, because Belarus is pretty much a puppet of the Russians. And so I think that they could have a revolution, but whether it would be successful or not is an entirely different question, based off of what would happen if the Russians got involved or not. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much for watching once again. We've had a lot of interesting questions tonight, and also learned a couple of interesting things. Like, for example, the whole thing with the 5.56 and 2.23. I thought they were similar, but apparently there's a small difference in between the two that does make them different. So, with that, I thank you all so much for watching, and also make sure to get yourself some civilian grade S300s. They are far better than the military grade, and I thank you all so much for watching once again. If you are new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe. Of course, it helps us, and make sure to click the like button, because if you click the like button, this helps us to reach more people, and of course, that helps more people to get this news, and hopefully not listen to me talk about the 5.56 and 2.23 rounds being the same. But of course, I thank you all so much for coming. And another thing, we have raised $8.3 thousand in support of Doctors Without Borders. We surpassed that goal by a mile, even further than that. And I gotta say, that is really impressive to know the Lee Spring Army always comes together and pulls through to support Ukraine every single time. And so with that, thank you all once again. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for day 153 of the news. Thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, Tuesday. Good night, and take care.